All right. All right. What's up, everybody? Welcome to, I guess we'll call this the Glass Less Travel. This is going to be the last episode of 2020. Crazy year that it's been, but we wanted to do a kind of a 2020 whiskey roundtable or year in review. I want to let everybody know who is tuned in right now or who is watching right now or will be watching here in a couple minutes. I know we got a couple people already. If you comment on YouTube or if you comment on the Fox Valley Whiskey Society Facebook page, please allow StreamYard to use your name so that it comes up. Otherwise, it'll just come up user, and it makes everything really complicated. But if you do comment, it will pop up right here on the screen. So if you have any comments...
StreamYard for that. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to say it.
If you guys do have anything that you want to chime in, feel free to comment. We'll try to get to it as best we can. So we're going to be going over pretty much everything that happened in the world of whiskey, or not everything, but the big stuff that happened in the world of whiskey in 2020. I want to introduce everybody. You guys probably all know Dan Gryson, who is in the blue sweatshirt, our good friend, whiskey fellow, aka Jeff Schwartz down there, and Sam Knash Green, whiskey author, and all-around badass author of the Beginner's Guide to Whiskey. We'll give everybody the website where you can buy that book if you guys are interested here at the end of the episode. Gentlemen, how are you guys doing this evening?
Fantastic.
Good. Excellent.
Everybody's staying COVID free, I assume. I hope.
So far, so good.
So far, so good.
Yeah. I'm in the middle of a scare right now, actually. So
yeah. So Sam, you are out there in California. Dan, you're over here in Elgin. Jeff, you are up there in Dane County, Wisconsin. I'm out here in North Aurora. Again, you guys, if you guys want to comment, let us know what you guys think about 2020, the world of whiskey. We're going to get started. We're going to talk about the biggest releases of 2020 in the world of whiskey. We're going to start with bourbon. You guys know that I'm not really much of a Scotch guy. I'm not really much of an Irish whiskey guy, but I am a bourbon guy, and I know you guys are too. So let's start with the big releases. What came out in 2020 for bourbon? I think we can't really start a show talking about the big releases without talking about Buffalo Trace and Sazerac. Obviously, you've got your requisite BTAC and your Pappy, which came out this year again. Comes out every September. But the one that was really interesting to me was the Weller Single Barrel, which came out in June. The Kosher line, which also came out in June, and the E.H. Taylor 18-year anniversary, all of which came out in June. It begs the question, it's kind of too early to see here if there's a trend, because they did release Weller Full Proof last June. They also released E.H. Taylor Amaranth Grain of the Gods last June. So it's still a little early to see if there is going to be a trend going forward. But there has been some whispers of some more Weller releases going forward for Buffalo Trace. Curious as to your guys' thoughts, and you guys out there that are listening and watching. We had the Weller Single Barrel. We had the Kosher line from Buffalo Trace, the Benchmark series, which was an Indiana-only release, the E.H. Taylor, the Blanton's Gold, Blanton straight from the barrel. For Buffalo Trace and Sazerac, what was the biggest release of the year?
if I may, real quick.
You may.
Well, I didn't want to interrupt Jeff. I mean, it's Whiskey Fellow.
Go for it.
Not in 2020, but in probably mid to late 18, actually, I had a client, I do private tastings here in LA. I had a client who was a synagogue, actually, and they're like, look, everything needs to be kosher. And it didn't need to, like, be certified kosher. It didn't have to have, like, the kosher, like the OU, as everyone calls it. But I'm like, I'm scratching my brain. I'm like, wait, how isn't whiskey kosher? It's distilled grain. And unless it's finished in a wine cask, really, it's pretty much guaranteed almost to be kosher. And I'm just like, so the kosher line to me is just like, I'm sorry, what?
So it's kosher when a rabbi, when it meets the dietary standards and a rabbi has to bless it. So you need that latter part. And my understanding what Buffalo Trace did wasn't really anything special, except they cleaned all the stills and cleaned the fermentation tanks, yada, 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 and then ran a fresh batch through and then had a rabbi come in and bless it, and behold, you have the kosher line.
which really isn't anything particularly new for for a distillery. Journeyman up here in Wisconsin does that. That's their certified organic, certified kosher. So is the kosher line, is it something that is kind of a sales technique, or is it something that can safely be drank by many more people, being that it's kosher certified?
Well, it can be drunk by many people, but I mean, let's keep in mind who we're talking about here. We're talking about Sazerac, who is the master of market manipulation.
Mm-hmm.
It's whatever they do is limited edition. I mean, even their namesake right now, Buffalo Trace, is very difficult to find in some markets. And they have probably the best marketing team in the business to generate excitement and to fuel the secondary market.
Do you guys think that they are creating artificial scarcity to increase the hype of their brand?
1 billion%. That's what allocation is artificial scarcity.
Right.
I'm just trying to figure out, is there anything in their portfolio that isn't currently allocated? Like up and down the line, everything is allocated. Maybe benchmark. I mean, you could probably say, you can go but it's hard to find. In Buffalo Trace, their standard bourbon, hard to find, and usually when you do, it's limit one.
Well,
watch what happens with early times.
That's my next point. Some of the big news that was out of the industry this year was obviously that Brown-Forman, who owns brands like obviously Old Forester, Jack Daniels, and Woodford Reserve, sold the early times brand to Sazerac. So I'm going to be very curious to see what happens with it. And their reasoning, and we'll get to this in a little bit, their reasoning was they wanted to kind of clear their portfolio so that they could focus on their core brands, being Old Forester, Jack Daniels, and Woodford Reserve. And we did see some big things out of Old Forester and Brown-Forman this year. But we'll go back to we'll stick with Sazerac for now. Some of the other things that came out this year, obviously Stag Junior Batch 14, and most recently Stag Junior Batch 15, which was just announced and I believe just released. A big announcement was made for those Blanton's lovers out there. The Blanton's Gold and Blanton's Straight from the Barrel would be released in the United States for the first time. Curious as to what you guys feel about the European only releases being now released here in the United States. Is it again? I mean, this is obviously artificial scarcity. It's creating hype for marketing.
Not really. This is the opposite problem. This is 100% blame on COVID. You have a lot of these. You have a lot of these duty-free only things. Makers 101 is an excellent example of that. Available only duty-free. Well, nobody's flying, so they're not selling. Now we've got a glut. And so we bring it to the standard American market, which buys everything. It gets hyped a little bit, and they are able to move inventory.
Right. Yeah, and Sam, just like you said, the Baccarat edition, which was available in duty-free shops, and they just, again, released it this year, which we'll talk about here in just a minute. Oh, pardon me. Wilson Torres, my good buddy over there at Union Horse Distilling out there in Kansas. Wilson, good to see you. Cheers. Hope you've been doing good. What else came out? Just released a couple days ago, maybe, from Sazerac. This one is out of Barton 1792.
Oh yeah, the new line. What is it? Thomas More?
That's More, which is finished bourbons from Barton 1792. I want to say it's like a port, a Cabernet, and a cognac cask that they're finished in. Really cool history there with Thomas S. More. He was actually influential in helping build the actual Barton distillery. Those I don't know that they're available just yet.
They're not out yet, I don't think. I know some members of the media who are on Sazerac's press list have been getting them. But at least in West Coast, they're not out here yet.
So Jeff, we can expect a review here within the next couple months or so, couple weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a backlog of stuff I need to get done before the end of the year. But yeah, there's a couple things that are on the radar to get out sooner.
Well, if you need help with that backlog, you've got my number.
Hey, Jeff, you want to PM me my address? Just feel free to send anything backlog my way.
New world problem.
It's
a new world problem.
It's an excellent problem to have.
So I'm curious as to what you guys think we'll expect to see in 2021. Obviously with COVID, it's kind of, it's I don't want to say it's screwed with the release schedule, but it's certainly, thrown a wrench in the gears. Specifically talking about Weller, specifically talking about E.H. Taylor, which the past 2 years at least have been released in June, and with whispers from Buffalo Trace of Weller releasing a bottled in bond, a cognac finish, different things, non-chill filter. I'm curious as to whether or not you guys think June is going to be a big year and something to look forward to from Buffalo Trace. Are we going to get a new Weller? Are we going to get a new E.H. Taylor? Or are they going to try to create that scarcity like they have been and say, no, we're going to push it to 2022 or push another release way out, but we're going to keep teasing it?
Well, we're going to get another Weller release here real soon. And I'm talking maybe January or February. And that is the Weller Angel Share. Sam, are you familiar with that?
I am familiar with it.
So I think that's going to be the next big thing.
I heard it's very light on the palate.
It's extraordinary, very, very light.
Super airy, very, very delicate. You really got to concentrate to get that, aromatic and flavor.
Almost like nothing's there at all.
It is. But I think that's going to be huge. The Weller fanboys are going to probably snap it up. Retail's supposed to be about $49.99. My guess is you're probably looking at $349.99 on the secondary.
I would estimate closer to $499.99. But what I'm really interested in is that Yamazaki Midori cask.
Yeah.
The Japanese fanboys, people who go crazy over the Japanese stuff, they're going to be like, oh my God, the Japanese whiskey in a weird cask? Give it to me.
Do you
remember the retail on that?
Let's talk about let's go back to that Angel Share. I'm excited for barrel picks of the Angel Share.
That could be very interesting.
Another big player, some big releases this year out of Heaven Hill. Obviously, we have the requisite barrel proof A, B, and C, which came out this year. The big one, the big two from Elijah Craig were the Rye and the Toasted Barrel. The Toasted Barrel was everybody's list. It blew up social media. You saw it on secondary almost immediately, going for a few $100s. What else we got? William Heaven Hill, the Bottled and Bond 13-year. That was a gift shop only release. Parker's Heritage.
The Heaven Hill 8-year bonded.
So those William Heaven Hills, those are distillery only releases. I had a chance to actually try one of them. I think it was the 13-year Bottled and Bond, thanks to my good friend Dan Johnson down there in Louisville. Absolutely fantastic. Absolutely loved it. Parker's Heritage 14th edition, which was the heavy char, was released this year. Old Fitzgerald 14-year Bottled and Bond. And then Heaven Hill, I'm curious as to your thoughts on this. Heaven Hill is releasing some really, really old age statement stuff coming up here in the future. 21, 26, and 36-year bourbon.
36-year-old bourbon.
Is it too much? Have these
What's the
age
proof?
statements
35%?
I know, right? So the proof is, I believe, on the 36-year is relatively low. I want to say it's right around that 90 proof bar. Is it too much? Is the 21, 26, 36? I mean, how far is too far?
I can tell you this. I've never tasted any of them, and I will tell you the 21 is probably drinkable. Beyond that, you might as well just pull a stave out of the barrel and chew on it, because
exactly
that's what
you're going to concern as well.
Pardon me?
I was agreeing with you. Sorry, my audio is a little messed up. I said that's my concern as well. Is that at 26 and then 36 years, you're basically just looking at barrel. I mean, there'll be some, requisite, vanilla and isolacyl amylase. I like to sound fancy when I say that. The banana that people often get. But at 36, I mean, 26, it's a 26, right? 21, 26, 36?
21, 26, and 36. But they also have the 27 year, which was released, I want to say, in maybe 2019, that was put in that fancy box. But that was a 27 year, and that one was moderately drinkable, but still just super tanniny, super oaky.
You have to think someone there is tasting these and saying, okay, putting their name on it and saying it's good, let's put it out there.
Yeah.
Are they doing that just hoping someone's going to buy it? And
well, my question is with these high age statements, is bourbon trying to be too much like Scotch in that aspect, where you've got these really high age statements, you've got all these younger people, this younger demographic that is getting into bourbon because we're in a boom right now. So they're releasing all of these old age statements to try to maybe get Scotch drinkers, over to bourbon, or to try to increase value by saying, hey, we've got a 36-year-old bourbon and it's retailing for whatever MSRP, that's going to go for crazy amounts on secondary. Are they do you think they're trying to be too much like the cousins across the pond?
I hope
no.
not.
And I'll tell you why. Your average Scotch drinker isn't interested in bourbon, and no amount of age statement is going to go, oh, it's 36 years old, let me try a bourbon. That's just not how it works.
Right.
You get somebody like me, or I'm going to guess for most of us, although you've said you don't like Scotch, who drink everything. Yeah, I'll even try the 36 year if it comes across my palate, but I'm not excited about it.
Dan, what about you? Something with a huge age statement like that, is that something that you're going to add to your collection if it comes across at the right price?
No,
I won't. I mean,
I can tell you right now, on a bar salary, I can't afford that even if I wanted to at invoice cost.
Yeah.
We're probably looking at, the Double Eagle, very rare, much rare, very wow.
Yeah.
Was what, like $17K at retail?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, they
probably close to like 14 to 15 on invoice, and that's a 17-year-old. Imagine a 36-year-old. We're probably looking close to 50 to 60K, if not into six digits.
Well, there was a bourbon that was released a number of years ago, and I can't recall the brand. It was some guy had found a barrel, that had been sitting in a warehouse, and he ended up bottling it.
Diageo. Yeah, I know this.
It was like, what is it? 40?
Was his last name Diageo?
It was Diageo. It was 45. It was a 45 year.
Yeah.
Right, and it came in this beautiful box, and it came with it came with beautiful glassware. And everybody that I've seen that has tried it just said it was absolutely disgusting.
Don't doubt it.
So it begs the question, how much is? I mean, I have, I was fortunate enough to be gifted a Barter House 20, and that's not too much. I like, my bourbon at least, 12 years for me is kind of the cutoff point. But this one is, 20 years. It's absolutely beautiful. So I'm curious to try them. We'll see what comes down the road. Maybe if Sam or Jeff, if you guys get samples, wink wink, you can send some my way, huh?
I would love to, but I'm not on Heaven Hill's list, and they're like, I don't know if we want you on the list.
Yeah.
I'd like to point out Steve's comment there,
which was actually my quote.
Yeah. Meh, it's Scotch.
Yeah.
So if I can tell the story.
Please.
If I can tell the story.
Let me just interject real quick.
No.
My palate was fried on bourbon already. So knowing that, go ahead.
I like
so
the story.
we had a gathering, a pre-COVID gathering. And we were sharing bottles all night long. And Mike was like, I want to try a Scotch. So I've got a couple nicer ones. I brought out it's a 28-year-old Highland Park, but bottled by Cadenheads, or Cadenheads, however you pronounce it.
Ooh, yum.
It's probably one of my favorite bottles. I dropped a little bit of extra coin on it that I normally would on a bottle. And I pour it for Mike, and I'm all excited for him to drink it. And he's like, it's Scotch. And I'm like, that costs more than every other bottle here combined. And you're just like throwing it away like it's nothing. So
Mix it with 50-50 with Fanta Orange.
Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, and it'll be fine. Yeah, it was actually Faygo. I mixed it with Faygo.
Why would you ruin good Fanta?
So let's talk about Old Forester and Brown Foreman. They had some really big releases.
If I may, real quick, before we go into Old Forester and Brown Foreman, just touching back on the age statement real quick. You were talking about bringing the Scotch drinkers over to bourbon, but the thing about Scotch versus bourbon is that the climates are massively different.
Oh, very.
So
yeah.
with a 30-plus-year-old Scotch, you're not going to get a lot of that bitter, tannic oak and char. It's going to be a little more mellow, a little more mature than I feel like a 36-year-old bourbon coming out of Kentucky would be.
Yeah, I think the point that I was trying to get across though was, especially when we're dealing with, because we're in a bourbon boom right now, we're dealing with people that might not know as much as us four here or the people that are watching. So they might not know that difference between Scotland and Kentucky, or Scotland and the United States as far as climate goes. What they look at is what's on the label.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you've got some, 25-year-old guy out there who's like, oh, if 40-year-old Scotch is, $300, then a 36-year-old bourbon has got to be worth at least $300. So from a marketing standpoint, it makes a little bit of sense. Whether or not that's what you're doing, we'll never know. We can speculate.
If you talk about climate too, I have a bottle on the way that I've ordered. It's a independent bottler who bottled it, so they couldn't say the distillery, but they said it's a 24-year-old pre-fire from a very heavenly distillery that sits on a hill. But it's 24 years old, but it was aged 12 years in Kentucky and 12 years in Scotland. So that's a different 24 years than say 24 years in Kentucky. So
yeah, that's more like, that would to me be more like
a
16-year
16-year-old or
right.
Yeah, you'd wind up 16, 18, somewhere around there.
Yeah.
But it's also a different climate entirely, so it's gonna like the air, and it depends on where in Scotland was it aged. Is it by the sea? Is it inland? Is it a lot of things could come out of this. So I don't have it yet. It should be here mid-January. So
gonna be excited to hear about that.
Yeah. I'm definitely curious on that as well. I'm also curious as to what you guys think. What was the biggest release out of either Heaven Hill or Buffalo Trace this year? You guys that are watching, we got a whole bunch of you watching right now. So feel free to comment what you think was the biggest release out of either Heaven Hill or Buffalo Trace this year. We're going to move on to Old Forester and Brown Foreman. The big release, I think, the big news, which we already talked about, was the acquisition from Brown Foreman to Sazerac, which was early times. But Woodford Reserve, the Baccarat edition, which was a $2,000 MSRP, was released just maybe a month or two ago. That one is aged
about 2 months.
It's just regular Woodford, but it's aged an additional 3 years in French oak XO cognac casks. We had the Woodford Reserve Master Collection, very fine, rare bourbon. Jeff, you actually reviewed both of those, I believe.
Yeah.
Tell us your thoughts on both. Let's start with the Baccarat.
Let's talk about the Baccarat. The Baccarat, you're not buying the whiskey. You're buying the crystal decanter.
Sure.
The whiskey is good. Is it a $2,000 whiskey? Nope. And there's very few things that I would say, yes, that's worth $2,000 on.
Probably not one of them.
No, it's not, and it's not a slam on Woodford. You're paying for the decanter. I don't use.
By the way, it took 5 days to make.
Yeah,
and that's what they claim.
I don't use decanters, so I mean, it's a beautiful piece. It's streamlined, but it's not my jam. On the other hand, the Masters Collection, the very fine rare bourbon, one of the better bourbons I've had this year. I was really impressed.
Sam, you had mentioned the airport, the off-duty shops. This was obviously something that was released to the off-duty shops 2018, 2019. Do you think we're going to see more? And Jeff, you brought up an incredible point that people aren't traveling as much, so they have to take that stuff from the duty-free shops and put it onto the shelves. Blanton's Gold, straight from the barrel, the Woodford Reserve. Sam, we'll start with you, and then we'll go to Dan. Do you think we're going to start to see more of that stuff that we would normally get at O'Hare Airport, LAX? You know, are we going to start to see those duty-free releases on the shelf at liquor stores?
Yes and no. And I know how question that answer that is. Part of the problem, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't travel internationally. I haven't in like, God, I was not even a teenager last time I traveled internationally. Or no, wait, I guess I was. Never mind. But I don't travel internationally that often, so I don't look at the bottles really because I can't pick them up. So I don't know if there's 700 or 750s. I believe there's 700 ml or 70 CL, which is one of the reasons that America doesn't get a lot of those good, neat bottles, is because we're very annoying that it has to be 750 ml or 375 or 200 or 50. Right. You know, we don't bring in 70 CL, 700 ml bottles. So for the brands to, the distilleries to produce extra liquid just for America.
Right.
It takes, and forgive my math here, it takes, I believe, roughly 14 extra bottles to make for America, right? I had it in my head, I swear.
I swear I had it. I can't get out this way.
This extra 50 ml, you lose, I believe, 14 bottles is what I was going to try and say. I think you're losing something like 14 bottles.
Yeah. Dan, what do you think?
Which is just over a case of, a 12-pack case. So, yes, we'll see some more of them coming in. I'm sorry, please go ahead. I'll keep talking if you don't shut me up.
Dan, what do you think? I mean, I don't travel all that much, but I know that, when I do go to the airport, we walked by a duty-free shop not too long ago. And I just kind of, I peeked in there and I thought to myself, man, I'm starting to see a lot more of this stuff on the shelf. Opinion, what are we going to start to see a lot more of this stuff just released kind of nationwide?
Yeah, I'll be honest, I don't travel a lot in general, let alone internationally, but every time I'm in an airport, and I've seen some duty-free shops that have some great stuff and some that don't. And that whole concept is, I've just heard that tonight, and it's brilliant now that I think about it. But I initially thought like straight from the barrel and Blanton's Gold is a money grab and they're trying to make money, because honestly, they're pricing it higher in America than I could have gone online and bought it in Europe and had it shipped to me cheaper than I could go to Binny's and buy it. But I think they're business people and they're going to sell it however they can. And if COVID's continuing to see less travel and people aren't buying it in duty-free shops, then you're probably going to see it on American shelves, and you're going to see it in more places, because they got to sell the product and there's a market for it. And as long as there's a market for it and people are putting their money on the table for it, let's put it in front of the consumer.
Now, is that $150 or $125? Somebody maybe correct me if which one it is, 120 or 150. I think is what the MSRP is.
For both of them,
Gold, I believe it's Blanton's Gold, and I think the straight from the barrel is also right around that same price.
Yeah.
Too much, or is it right on par with what it should be?
Too much.
Too much.
I think it's too much, but people are paying for it, so
right.
It's Blanton's, and like Weller, you can do a Blanton's Angel share and sell the heck out of it, and people will buy it because it's got a pretty horse stopper on it.
Exactly.
A fool and his gold are easily parted.
Yeah. And Maggie Orlando, pardon us. We know you like to collect the horsies. We miss you guys. Wish we could see you guys soon. So we talked about the Woodford Reserve. What was that, Dan?
In perspective, I bought a Blanton's Gold overseas, shipped to my door for like $85, $90 like 4 or 5 years ago. So, and that, it was $60 over there. You pay $30 shipping. So
to me, even at $150 for something that I'm, probably not going to get all that frequently or not going to have, especially if I can bring it to a bottle share, or if I can bring it to a friend and say, hey, you've never had this before. For me, I think the experience for myself and for, the people that I'm sharing it with, for $150.
Yeah, I think the question is it worth it? Is it worth it to you, and can you afford it? If you can and it is, then yeah, it's worth the money.
Yeah, worth is relative. It's all personal.
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's just like the people who pay, $1,000 for, for whatever BTAC or Pappy. If that's something that you really want, and you have the money, you do you, man. You do you.
We all
don't mind to say you spend too much money.
And the big thing to keep in mind is it's single barrel bourbon, and so every batch, for lack of a better term, is going to be different.
Mm-hmm.
So the fact that you really, really love Blanton's Gold the last time you had it, what you're going to taste the next time is not the same thing.
Right.
Also, yes.
We all see that Russell's 2003 over your shoulder, Mike, so we know you're not afraid to spend money on.
Figure out. Yeah, I got to figure out right there. But I have.
I actually have a little sample that I need to try.
Oh, it's fantastic. Right now, I'm sipping on the Restoration Rye out of Castle and Key. This was Marianne Eaves' final project with the distillery.
On the topic of Marianne Eaves, she's doing the Eaves blind thing. I signed up. I had some friends nominate me for one of the scholarships because I can't afford, the $300, whatever it is, to do it. But it seems like an interesting project. What are you guys' thoughts on it?
I think what she's doing, and Dan and I are in a text group with our other friend Steven, who I hope is still watching. He was as of at least about 15 minutes ago. We were talking about Marianne Eaves, or maybe it was Dan Gryson, you and Dan Johnson and I. And that's a topic that is farther down on the list, but we'll get to it now while we're on it. There's speculation as to why she left. I think it was personal reasons. I think she had a baby. She was I don't want to speculate what was going on in her personal life. She seems very happy right now. I know there was a kind of a rough split. She kind of announced that very publicly on her Instagram page when she shared a comment from Castle and Key on her Instagram story a couple weeks ago, saying, oh, well, all I am to you is just, whatever. You can go read it. It might be posted on her Instagram page. I know that she was trying, and Sam, you probably know more about this, with some kind of, box set or some kind of subscription or whatever she was working on. That was huge news in the whiskey world, in the bourbon world at least, that Marianne Eaves was departing from Castle and Key, and they haven't even released her baby, her flagship product yet. Before we get into the rest of the Old Forester and Brown-Forman releases, let's just get straight to it. Marianne Eaves. Dan, let's start with you. What do you think? I mean, what's your
I think there's obviously a backstory we'll never know. I don't think it was an amicable split. Personally, I always struggled with the fact that she was a master distiller without her actually producing anything. But I also think she's a brilliant person. I think she knows what the heck she's doing. She's probably more qualified than most people to be a master distiller. It's just that title gets thrown around a lot. I know that, she put a lot of effort into it, and I think she definitely probably felt a little betrayed by the company. Who knows exactly what the backstory is? I don't know her personally. I just know that I've been a fan of hers ever since I saw her on the documentary Neat, and I followed her, and that's how I found Castle and Key. And I'm also drinking the Restoration Rye, and I know it's a blend that she wasn't involved in blending the barrels, but it's her recipe. She distilled it, she put it into the barrels, and I'm extremely impressed with this. So I think she's in a good place now. I think she's happy. I think she's doing what she wants to do, and everyone moves forward, and that's kind of the industry. I mean, it's kind of how it is in this world. People go from distillery to distillery, and hopefully everyone gets along in the end. So
I'm excited to see what she does still. Being as young as she is, and being as advantageous, and being a go-getter, and just having the knowledge that she has, with in distilling. I'm excited to see what she does in the future, whether it be some sort of subscription, or whether she partners with a distillery, or whether she opens her own. It's going to be it's certainly going to be exciting to see.
She's brilliant, and she's a very smart person. So
she's
going to land on a very hard worker. She's going to land on her feet
for sure. We'll keep going with the Old Forester Brown Foreman. So we talked about the Masters Collection Very Fine Bourbon, which was a blend of barrels. It was actually their oldest release. It was a blend of barrels up to 17 years old. The other big release out of Old Forester was the Old Forester 150th, which was the 150th anniversary of Old Forester, which was officially a company back in 1870 with George Garvin Brown. Hopefully we all know the history there. We have the Old Forester Birthday Bourbon. The Old Forester 150, by the way, there was 3 releases of it, all 3 being very, very distinctly different. Did any of you get to sample any of them or able to find any of them on the shelf?
No.
Sam hangs his head in shame.
Find it on the shelf, yes. Taste it, no.
So Sam, we're going to get to the birthday bourbon, and I know, so you and I are friends on Facebook. By the way, you are hilarious. I love everything you post. It's super funny. You were talking about, you did on your show, you were looking for the birthday bourbon. I don't know if it was 2019 or 2020, but I know you had commented like, hey, somebody get me a hookup with the birthday bourbon. Regarding the birthday bourbon, this was, I don't know, however many releases it's been so far. Jeff, I think you and I had talked about it on one of the episodes that we did. Is birthday bourbon, do you think, going to be on the pedestal with BTAC and Pappy, or is it always going to be just below?
I think in some cases it already is. But, you know, it appeals to a different segment than BTAC and Pappy does. You know, you've got people who are more fans. Their whole year is looking forward to the next birthday bourbon. They're not looking. Let me rephrase that. They're not looking for BTAC or Pappy, but their number one item is Old Forester birthday bourbon. So, you know, I don't know that it's fair to say that they're not on the same level, because I think you've got 2 separate audiences for it.
Sure. Dan, you, I was actually, I think it was the bottle share that we did last year, or in like January of this year. Where you have or had one of the releases of birthday bourbon. What are your thoughts? Is it going to be, is it be this big thing? Mean, obviously every year people look for it, but is it ever going to be on that top tier with the rest of Buffalo Trace?
I think it's funny because I think of it in like terms of when they got popular, and birthday bourbon was like one of the last ones to become one of those sought afters. Like even when BTAC was going crazy, you could walk into a liquor store and find birthday bourbon. But I think Jeff's point is perfect. It's like there's a different audience. I think everyone in bourbon knows and loves Pappy, whether they know it and love it by actually trying it or just the reputation of it. So I think that's always going to have that reputation. The people that really aren't into bourbon know they can buy a Pappy and flip it right away. And I think those people are starting to realize they can do the same with birthday bourbon, but not quite to the same return on investment, so to speak, which is, unfortunately we have to speak about that. But I think it's like Jeff said, there's a different audience. The people that love birthday bourbon really love birthday bourbon and would rather have that than anything else. I don't find any of them on the shelves anymore, and I don't have any back room, friends that can call me and get it. So I think all of mine are from like 2014 and 15, and those are the last ones I've seen. But yeah, I mean, if I ever came across any of them, I'd probably buy them just because they're good whiskeys, and I wouldn't pay secondary, but any of them I'd buy market at MSRP.
What about?
But I think birthday bourbon is also different. It varies a lot from year to year. Like,
absolutely.
I mean, so
wasn't this year the youngest release to date?
Yes, I think it was 10 years. It was 10 years old, not 11.
Some other pretty interesting stuff that came out of Old Forester was that they've done barrel picks in the past, but I believe this was the first year that they started doing higher proof or barrel proof.
This is the first year that Old Forester is doing barrel-proof barrel picks.
Now, Sam, have you had a chance to try any of those limited release barrel picks or anything? I know Jackie Zykin, which Dan and I, it's our celebrity crush.
Jackie is so fun, by the way. I was fortunate enough to join some other industry professionals at a lunch with her a couple of years back, and she's just got a razor sharp wit. And, I really respected Jackie because of the work that she does. And of course, I love seeing more women entering whiskey and being successful in whiskey. But the razor sharp wit is like, oh, that's fucking cool. I did try one single barrel right kind of before they were around. Like when they were first coming out, my friend got a hold of one to do for a whiskey club. Mm-hmm. And he gave me a little sample of it. I was very much not impressed.
I've heard they're very hot and alcohol forward.
They are hit or miss, like most single barrels, I'm going to have to admit.
I will tell you that I had a chance to pick a barrel on that. We got in either 3 or 4 samples. I rejected all of them.
Really?
For speakeasy, right?
Yes.
That's who that is. So I'm sorry. I'm going through my phone right now, trying to figure out who this person is that is commenting. This is my friend from Vietnam, the brand ambassador for Rooster. Yes, Rooster beer. It's 12 hours. They're 12 hours ahead, so it's 7 a.m. It's early enough, I think, for you to have a beer. So go ahead and get on that.
Good job.
Not just for breakfast.
Now, look here for a second, guys. It is no longer 5 o'clock somewhere. It is 2020 everywhere. So open that beer. Open that whiskey.
Yeah, you know what? And I'm hoping he sends us a case of that beer because I want to try it. I'm curious as to your thoughts out of obviously there's more behind the Brown-Forman with Jack Daniels other than Woodford Reserve and Old Forester. Jack Daniels had a pretty interesting year as well. They lost and got a new master distiller. They had the Eric Church release come out. They had some pretty big things. The big three with Brown-Forman, Jack Daniels, Old Forester, and Woodford Reserve. Who had the biggest year?
Actually, you're missing one of the big four, Glendronach.
Well, see that, and that's why we have you guys here, because I'm not a Scotch guy.
Because Glendronach released the 1989 Kingsman vintage, which ties into the Kingsman, which is the prequel for the Kingsman franchise. And as you all know, manners maketh man. Jack did lose their master distiller. But
he's not dead, by the way. He's just not with the company anymore.
They just can't find him.
Yeah.
He's just dead to them.
It's a Where's Waldo situation is what it is.
But their assistant master distiller, whom I have met, and his name is escaping me right now. It's one of those stage fright on camera things.
I can't remember his name either, and I didn't bother to look it up. I want to say his name is Chris.
It's inevitable that he was going to step up and take the master distiller role. So it's not like they lost someone. It's like, oh, we've got to search for someone. It was like, all right, he's stepping down. Now we go into legal conversations and, prepare this before we make the public announcement that, our assistant master distiller is now our master distiller.
We're starting to see some really interesting stuff out of Jack Daniels and Brown-Forman regarding their the Tennessee Taster Series, which...
Yeah. I have back at home, I'm in my studio, I have a Tennessee Taster's Barrel Proof Rye.
So I have two of them. But there's a couple new ones out. These are distillery only releases. They're very, very small batch. And by small batch, I mean 20,000 bottles are sold. But they're
Can we discuss the definition of small batch?
They're the smaller, the 200 milliliter bottles. 2021, are we going to see big things out of Jack Daniels? I know this is a bourbon discussion, and I don't even want to get into the topic of Tennessee whiskey versus bourbon. What are we going to see? Bigger stuff out of Brown-Forman? Especially if they said, okay, we're going to get rid of early time so that we can focus on boom, boom, boom. Our big three.
Yep.
Well, first of all, Jack released their barrel proof rye this year. They had the Tennessee Taster before in 2019, I believe, and Jack has now officially released Jack Daniel's barrel proof single barrel rye,
which is fantastic, by the way.
I haven't been able to find it, but I have my Tennessee Taster at home, so I can only imagine how good. If it's the Tennessee Taster is delicious, that's probably just as good. It's probably a little bit of higher proof.
Jeff, what do you think? What do you think we'll see out of Jack Daniel's?
I think you could see close to anything. No, I'm serious about that. The whole Brown-Forman portfolio is doing a lot of, whether it's Scotch or American or whatever, they're doing a lot of neat new stuff, and there's no reason in the world that Jack can't be part of that.
Mm-hmm. So let's get into Wild Turkey. We got a couple more distilleries here. Dan, I know you are a Wild Turkey fanboy. One of the big releases this year, one of the big announcements, Wild Turkey Rare Breed Rye, which was absolutely beautiful. Fantastic whiskey. Wild Turkey Masters keep 17-year bottled in bond. The Russell's Reserve 2001, which you see behind me right here, but just released maybe today or yesterday on the TTB. Actually, no, this isn't even today or yesterday, because some liquor stores have already gotten this bottle. 101 Bourbon and Rye got a new label. A little bit sleeker, a little bit more modern. They don't focus so much on the sticker on the packaging as they do the actual bottle. They have a turkey embossed right on the bottle. The sticker itself is very slim and narrow. Do you think, and you can see that picture, it's actually posted to the Fox Valley Whiskey Society page. I posted it about 2 hours ago, so you can see the bottle of rye. Bourbon is basically the same thing. I think it's just a different color. It's burgundy instead of green. Do you think, my assumption there was, and Dan, I texted you and Steven saying it's a little bit sleeker, it's a little bit more modern, it's a little bit more minimalist. And I think that's maybe catering to a younger crowd of somebody that's not necessarily focusing so much on the label, but when they see it, they say, oh, I like that because it's clean, it's sleek, it's modern, it's minimalist. Do you think Bourbon, Wild Turkey, Buffalo Trace, Sazerac and Brown Forester, do you think they're taking a new approach to marketing their product to say, okay, we're in a bourbon boom, we've got a younger clientele now, the 28 to 33 crowd or whatever it is. Do you think we're going to start to see a ton of new label designs kind of catering more to the younger eye to get a new generation coming in to drink bourbon?
I mean, I think it's 100%. Well, not 100%, but I do think the idea is to continue to shed Wild Turkey's, biker bar image that they've always had, and they're starting to finally get out of. I do like the label. I think someone I saw said it's not as Instagrammable because now when the bottle's half empty, you don't have the label to fill it. So, but it is a cool looking label. I hope it doesn't come with a price increase, which sometimes bottle changes do. One of the nice things about 101 is you can get it. It's a great whiskey at a great price, and Wild Turkey has maintained a relatively low cost rare breed at a barrel strength. Bourbon and Rye are both relatively affordable in today's standards. But yeah, I think everyone's trying to get everyone that's working in the whiskey industry, the bourbon industry, remembers years ago when bourbon became my dad's drink and they lost everyone. So now they're trying to make sure that it doesn't grow up and the younger people are finding something else to drink. There's lots of spirits that are working hard to get the market share. So if we can continue to keep our consumer younger, we'll never become dad's drink again. We'll always be the cool drink. So yeah, absolutely. I think marketing is 95% of whiskey these days.
What about you, Jeff? I mean, you look at it historically and you look at the decline from the 50s all the way to really the 80s. And you see that it was basically mostly because of these people that didn't want to drink what their parents were drinking. Because bourbon is having its heyday right now, do you think maybe within the next 2, 3, 4 years we're going to start to see a lot of label changes within the bourbon industry to kind of catch the eye of those younger people that are going to the liquor store, the binnies, the big guys, and they're walking down the aisle and they're like, I don't really know what I want to get, but I like that label. It's just nice and clean and neat. You know, are we going towards a younger clientele?
Well, I mean, keep in mind that's how wineries do it. Is you make a gorgeous looking label, and that's how you sell the wine, because nobody can tell the difference, outside of it. But at the same time, uh, today's youngest drinkers are coming of the age to where their parents were drinking or are drinking bourbon. It's that the 80s is done. 90s and 2000s came in, and it's back up, and our kids are drinking what we're drinking now. So my secret hope, nothing against my people in the whiskey industry, but my secret hope is that flavored vodka will come back in style, and they'll all gravitate to that, and it'll be easier to find things on shelf. But yes, I do believe the trend is going to be cleaner, streamlined, more minimalist. Everything is going minimalist right now.
Yeah,
it's not just alcohol; it's everything.
Right. Sam, what about you? Because you're, of that, you and I are kind of that younger generation. We're not that far apart in age. What do you think? I mean, do you think the bourbon industry, or maybe not the Scotch industry or the Irish, in whiskey industry, but the bourbon industry in particular, do you think, as far as their label goes, do you think they're trying to cater towards a younger clientele to, because right now, obviously us four are into it, but there's still that generation maybe before us that might, as they turn 21, 22, 23, 24, and so on, they might start getting into it. Do you think the label design is going to change here within the next, let's say, 5 years for a lot of this stuff to really catch the eye of that younger person? I'm interested as to what you have to say.
Duh.
That's a wrap, folks.
Nothing against any brand, but look at, especially not against this brand. I love this brand that I'm about to mention, but look at Barrel Craft Spirits. Look at their labels.
It's very minimalist.
Perfect.
Colorful.
Perfect example.
Minimal but colorful. Colorful, colorful and neat. Another one is Johnny Walker. All the different, expressions, the slanted label, and, the beautiful bottle design, and, the blue label being like just slightly out of your price range that you want to splurge on it.
Mm-hmm.
It's all marketing. And Jeff, I wouldn't mind seeing more gin on the market because gin is essentially flavored vodka. But this is okay. That went over everybody's head. It was
I got it.
No, I got it.
Joke. By the way, Mike, how young do you think I am?
So I'm 30. I'm 33, but I'm under the impression that you're not 30 just yet.
I'm 28.
28.
Yeah, I was going to say, Jeff.
So we're in that. We'll see. We're
okay. Yeah, we're right on each other.
I was going to say, Jeff. Mike just called us old, so I don't know if.
I call me old, so it's okay.
Yeah, I call me old. So
yeah, I got my thigh stuck in a wheelchair the other day.
Yeah.
Okay, that hurt, and it wasn't funny, but it is funny.
It wasn't funny, but it was funny.
That's all, folks.
It was funny on this end. That's all I know.
It was funny on my end, but not at the moment.
So let's go. And so actually, I'm going to go back to my good friend Don Hurst, who's over in Vietnam right now watching. It's almost 8 a.m. He said wild turkey isn't quite popular out here with the expat community in Saigon. Don, please comment. I'm curious, as other than beer, because you and I had a great conversation, which, by the way, you are the most viewed video on our YouTube channel right now with regarding the Rooster beer. I'm curious to hear from you, Don. What is, as far as like bourbon and whiskey goes, and I think we might have already talked about this. I'm curious as to what the big bourbon is, or what the big whiskey is out there in Vietnam. Steven, I don't think it's even a generational thing. Being newer to bourbon, I look at the labels first and most, and then check out what it is. I
agree with Steven.
I do the same thing. So I really like, and we'll talk about this here in a couple minutes, so I don't want to get too ahead of myself. I like what and Dan, I know you're going to say something, but Spirits of French Lick and Alan Bishop is doing out there. Their labels are absolutely beautiful. Even guys like Nelson Greenbrier you know, with their Tennessee whiskey. There's so many just cool looking labels out there. I want that to come back. But I won't get ahead of myself on this one.
Stickers.
What's that?
The stickers, affectionately, I wouldn't necessarily affectionately, but look at the stickers on the back of bottles for single barrel picks.
Yes. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, sometimes those are cool. Sometimes they're just, you know, like Steven has said, like, isn't that just like off of like a LaserJet printer? Let's talk about,
but it's, you know, it's a neat,
it's more, cool, yeah, they're usually cool designs.
It's marketing. It's something provided by the, you know, store, but it ties back into that marketing.
Yeah, yeah. And the cooler you can make it, the more approachable, you know, the more eye-catching it is, the more likely is that you're going to buy it.
Well, and I can tell you this much. The way that you pick a store pick, if you're unfamiliar with it, is you look for the sticker, and that tells you that it's excellent right there. And the second part is wax top. Oh my gosh, you've got a unicorn.
Dude, stop giving away all our secrets.
That's why we're wax dipping our barrel picks from Boot Hill, Jeff. I'm telling you, that's why, because they're unicorns and they're gonna go for $1,000 on secondary.
Awesome.
Let's talk about Beam. Let's talk about Beam Suntory. Whiskey Acres, is that it's either Nick or Jamie? I'm gonna say it's Nick.
I'm gonna say it's Nick also. Hi, Nick.
It's Nick.
I'm gonna say Jamie to be a contrarian.
If you we're as you guys know, out there in the Fox Valley Whiskey Society, we're working on getting samples from Whiskey Acres. You know, our MO has always been just kind of really, you know, unique, unconventional kind of pick. So we're working on.
I just learned, Mike. I just learned when we get it, cool label, wax.
Yes,
we got a
cool label.
We got a unicorn.
Our Whiskey Acres.
That is how you get it.
Our Whiskey Acres pick is going to be dipped in wax, by the way.
Yeah,
100%.
The whole bottle, though.
It's
going to be
the whole thing. The whole thing. You're not even going to be able to see it. Yeah, and then we're going to draw in their Whiskey Acres. Out of Beam Suntory this year was the Knob Creek 15-year, which sold at around like $120 or something like that. It actually really was a really great bourbon. I have yet to come across a Knob Creek that honestly I don't enjoy.
Knob
I've
Creek
got some store picks from them that are absolutely fantastic. So that was big. I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think, and we're going to ask this question at the very end when we've got a couple more distilleries to get through. I think Old Tub, I'm going to say it, was the biggest, most talked about whiskey release, bourbon release of the year. I said it. Come at me. It was talked about.
I'll be there in 24 hours.
Everybody talked about it. Whether you love it or you hate it, everybody was talking about it. It's affordable. It's a limited release. I happen to like it. You know, some people don't, but we'll see what happens in the future. Initially, it was just released as is he just chugging out of the bottle? Oh, that's his water bottle.
No,
it's a water bottle.
I'm laughing at
Whiskey
Acres here.
We're going to send all the barrel pick bottles to Schwartz's house and let him use his house wax for the dipping. As long as it's not earwax.
Damn it.
So Don, we'll go back to Dom's domestic market. Jack Daniels still reigns king over there in Vietnam. Johnny Walker and Chivas. Most sought after is the Japanese whiskey, which everyone loves. Hibiki. We're going to get into that kind of international market here in a second, but really interesting to kind of see what they're drinking internationally. And then there's Nick again. Labeling is fine, as a fine line between form and function. I totally agree. And then here we'll go back to this one. What do you guys think as far as Beam goes? Knob Creek 15, great release. Old Tub,
100 proof.
Am I wrong saying Old Tub bottled in bond was? I mean, it just everybody still today are still talking about it, whether they love it or they hate it. It's getting a ton of attention. Well, whether it's good or not, it's getting a ton of attention. A ton of attention.
I would rather go by Beam Black. Much easier.
No. I love Old Tub.
Yeah, I do too. I enjoy it.
You know, here's the deal: is Beam comes out once a year with these limited editions. It started with the Stiller's Cut, then it was Repeal Batch, and now we've got Old Tub. And I may have missed one in between Repeal Batch and Old Tub. These things are dirt cheap, and I think they are bang for the buck, just excellent. I've yet to be disappointed. Conversely, Knob Creek 15. I've had some very good 15-year-old Knob Creeks that were store picks. And I kind of learned a lesson with them. And I'm a huge fan of Knob Creek. I'm going to say that up front. But after getting screwed with the 25th anniversary, that was 3 times the price of a store pick, and it not being any better than any store pick that I've ever tasted. I kind of got burned by that. Why am I going to pay for 15 when I can just get a store pick that's 15 years old for less?
Right. So we're talking Knob Creek 100 proof, right?
Yeah.
I don't remember. Yeah, I think it was.
It's 100.
Yeah, that was
the 15's 100. I think the 12 year was higher. I think that was closer to the 120, but yeah, I'm with Jeff. I think, I've been like my burned by Knob Creek was the 2001 they came out with. Yeah. And that was like, we did that blind with just a line of Jim Beam, and that blind dead last, everyone hated it. I think I spent like $200 on that bottle, and it was not good, or 125, or I don't remember. It was just not good. And Knob Creek store picks are really good. Like, yeah, you can get a bad one here and there, but generally speaking, I got a 15-year-old one from Binny's for $50. That's 120 proof, and 120 proof 15-year-old Kentucky straight whiskey, bourbon whiskey for $50 is unheard of.
Yeah.
And that brings up another point, through Beam is one of the big things, one of the big stories of at least earlier this year. And by the way, Nick, if you're listening, we will be mentioned. Oh, wait, actually, hold on. There he is. We'll be Nick, stay right there. I'm going to bring you on in just a second. One of the big things out of Knob Creek this year was that their age statements got a little bit smaller because people were doing barrel picks of some really old stuff. So it's going to be really, really curious to see what happens here in the future. One of the big releases I want to talk about here real quick this year is obviously what's coming out of Whiskey Acres, my favorite local distillery. Nick is going to join us from Whiskey Acres. I want to talk about the Bottled and Bond. I want to talk about the Blue Popcorn. I want to talk about what you've got going on, Nick. Close the door behind. Turn the light on a little bit. Yeah, let's shed a little light on the subject.
Make sure it reflects there.
How's your hair?
Everybody, I want to see it.
You guys should know Nick from Whiskey Acres. We'll have him on here for a little bit. Let's talk real quick. Let's talk about Bottled and Bond. Let's talk about Blue Popcorn. Sam, if you haven't met Nick, Sam, Nick.
Hi there. Are you available in California?
Do you like olive oil?
Yeah, I can send you some olive oil.
I drink olive oil every day.
Hey, I love olive oil. I want to know how that Schwartz house wax is doing tonight.
Yeah, you've got.
Hang on, I'll tell you.
Yeah, let me see some drippage.
Nick, you've got some really, really cool stuff coming out of Whiskey Acres. Obviously, your Bottled and Bond, which was just released earlier this year, to rave reviews. I ended up getting 2 bottles of it. Sent a whole bunch of samples out to a bunch of friends to try it. Everybody loved it. We talked about it on the Sipping Social podcast that I did with them. Bottled and Bond. Blue Popcorn is getting released Friday, Saturday.
Or if you own the place.
It's
yesterday.
It's yesterday, yeah. Talk to Bottle. Let's talk about Whiskey Acres. What's new coming out of the craft spirits?
All right. So just before we get going here, I was online. Usually I try to disengage before or when I get home, but tonight we had to check the box with the state of Illinois. And in case anybody's watching, we've officially done our sexual harassment training for our entire staff at Whiskey Acres.
Fantastic.
You come visit.
It's about time.
Yeah.
Because this
hands off, don't touch.
A lot of attention.
Yeah. Like, we will not ask to grease your head or touch the wax or anything like that.
I think Jeff was feeling a little uncomfortable until you announced that.
Yeah.
We're good now. So, hey, so today is December 16th. 5 days we'll be celebrating our 6 years of making whiskey.
Fantastic. I love it.
And what I'm really proud of that is it's 6 years of like making whiskey. It's not like 6 years ago we bought somebody else's whiskey that we're going to bottle and talk about for a while. So what that means is that in our warehouses, we have 6-year-old whiskey. You can't have any of it yet, but it's there, and it's everything I ever hoped we ever hoped it would be. And we're just having a ton of fun. So to your point, we've kind of come of age this year. Coronavirus was not in our 2020 business plan, but we've survived and pivoted and gotten to a place that we're going to be here next year, 5 years, 10 years from now. I don't want to get too deep in Corona land, but what we're really proud of is that we have maintained our production. So back in March, April, May, June, July, I should say June, we added hand sanitizer as a product, but we just dedicated one of our shifts to that process, and we continued making whiskey through that entire time, so that moving down the road, we still have product to sell and drink, more importantly. But to kind of rewind 6 years ago, we started up. We've got we've made everything. We've been aging. We put a barrel program together, and I can tell you, I'm almost positive that like maybe next week we will be completely out of small barrels for any of our standard line, and everything for our standard line. Okay. Yep. And so everything that we'll put into our straight bourbon or bottle, and straight bourbon specifically, will be coming from 4-year-old minimum 53-gallon barrels. And as an extension of that, we're essentially sold out of our current release of our bottled and bond, but we've got some upcoming. We've got it. Why is there so much left?
Nick, this is like my 3rd bottle.
Thank you.
This week.
Yeah, this week.
So Valentine's Day, we're going to have.
I thought you meant today.
Yeah.
We'll have a release around Valentine's Day of a 5 or 6 barrel bottle and bond that can officially be declared 5 years. And then as we get through the 2021 year, our bottle and bond portfolio we've got some bottles on hand, but 5 years will become our standard bottle and bond release for our bourbon. And we'll also be able to release a 4 to 5 year bottle and bond rye.
Nice.
So as my kids say, my 3-year-old twins, I say, do you like it? And they like to do it. And I'm not specifically talking about whiskey. I mean, they do give me but they say it is D, and I'm never sure whether they're going to say D yucky or delicious. And it is delicious.
Talk to us about, you've got a big release going on. I mean, obviously, if you own the joint, you get the early dibs. And I believe the event that we did, was it October, I think, of last year? We got to sample a little bit of that blue popcorn, which is absolutely fantastic, with a small group of us. Friday, Saturday is going to be a big day for you guys. I also want to talk to you about one of the things that we have coming up later in the episode regarding some of the more political side of things with craft distilling. But I want to talk about the blue popcorn that you have coming up here pretty soon. Yeah. Talk to us about the blue popcorn. Sell us on it. What's going on with it?
So I'll give you a shot of the bottle here again. There we go.
And Sam, we'll make sure to get you samples out there in LA.
So just to, you guys will all know this, Whiskey Acres is a distillery that's built on a farm over in DeKalb. We grow what we distill. And the three of us, so my 2 business partners and co-founders are Jim and Jamie Walter. We built the distillery on their family farm. But the 3 of us had never made a drop of whiskey before in our lives when we decided to do this. So fairly substantial liability when you're starting a distillery. We did all the things we could do to get smart, but recognized that that wasn't enough. So we worked with Dave Pickerel. We brought him on our team to help us source equipment, ground truth our business plan, and really just kind of accelerate our path to production, as opposed to buy stuff and figure out how to run it ourselves and I guess by golly our way through this. Dave became a friend, rest in peace, Dave. He's been gone from us about 2 years. There's barely a day goes by that I go, I wish I could call Dave and figure this shit out. But let's rewind about 5 or 6 years ago. I was on the phone with Dave one day, and I don't remember if it was one of those phone calls where I said, Dave, I just did something really cool. Can you help me figure out how I did it and how I can repeat it? Or, Dave, I just screwed something up. Can you help me fix it? And I had a lot of those calls. But during that call, I was getting a simultaneous call from one of my friends in Western Illinois he raises popcorn. And I had this sort of light bulb moment. And I said, Dave, this is a little bit random here, but how do you make bourbon from popcorn? And his response was, I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't think it's ever been done before. And challenge accepted. So I got off the phone with Dave. I called my buddy. I call him Popcorn Andy. I called Popcorn Andy, and I said, hey, I need you to sip me some popcorn seed, because this was spring of like 2015. And I said, I'm not going to get in the popcorn business, but I want to make some whiskey out of it. So he sent it to us. We grew enough to make about a barrel's worth, and we were able to grow it. We were able to distill it, and it tasted good. And so we immediately scaled it. And so the first year, I think we grew enough to make a barrel. The second year, we grew enough to make 2 or 3 barrels, and we've scaled it every year since then. And so what we're releasing this weekend is, I think, second or third year of blue popcorn. And when I say blue popcorn, I mean this stuff is, some would call it purple, some would call it blue, but it is way the seed is sold to us is Shaman blue popcorn. And we hold these ears of corn in our hand, and we have the choice of, do we pop it and watch a movie, or do we grind it and make whiskey out of it? And I can tell you the level of satisfaction is much more immediate if we go pop it and go watch Avatar or something. But we chose to grind it and distill it, and it truly is something that's unique. And what we did was we let it cook for a little while and cook, but we set it in our warehouse, and it hit 4 years. We scaled it from our 375 milliliter artisan bottles to we did a new, back to the conversation I dropped in on. We built a new label, and we built a label to kind of sister our Bottle and Bond release. And Michael, if you could pick up that Bottle and Bond, and I'll pick up this. They're different, but it's in the same family.
Yeah, right.
And it's fun. It's unique. It's special, and it's very much representative of the way, we've got our standard bourbon, straight bourbon line, our straight rye. We have our Bottle and Bond. We'll have our Bottle and Bond rye. This is our first scale to market artisan series, and it's special. It's fun, and we'll have, coming down the road, we'll have a bottle or an artisan series Bloody Butcher. We'll have a Oaxacan green corn.
Oh.
We're going to continue to, I think, Jeff, you may have had your hands on our maple cask finish.
I have.
Favorite.
And that's a lot of fun. We learned that the way to make that guy work is set it out at cask strength. There's nothing better than that balance of those like maple tones and kind of sugary sweetness with 120 proof.
I also really enjoyed your 5.5, but you've got my curiosity piqued really hard on this blue popcorn. So you're doing unique things. One thing I would like for you to explain is, if nobody's been to the farm, tell us about your rick house.
So again, kind of back to, I'll credit Dave again, rest in peace. When we were building the distillery, we did our best to utilize the things on hand that we already had. And one of the things we had was an old Quonset hut. So a Quonset hut is, think if you watch a World War II movie, it's where the Air Force parked their airplanes, or it's where there were hospitals and military hospitals. So it's like a hoop shaped building. It's made of corrugated steel. And in the 40s and 50s, it was a very cheap way to store grain. We have one of those. And a lot of farms had one of those. Horizontal grain storage got replaced by vertical grain storage, what you would call a grain bin today. So 6 years ago, we were looking to where we're going to put our barrels, and we asked Dave, what do you think about putting them in this Quonset hut? And Dave said, I think it'll work. And the reason is because made of corrugated steel and sitting in northern Illinois. And in the last 2 years, that building has been as hot as 115, 120 degrees and as cold as -20 or 30. And because of the way it's shaped, you get constant convection in this space. And so every barrel in there has equal access to the chaos that is the state of Illinois' weather. And so these barrels are constantly expanding and contracting and truly giving us something that is special, is totally exposed to the elements and truly a product of our environment.
And I got to tell you, it is the coolest looking thing. You go in there and it's just different from any setup you've ever seen.
It's a really cool experience to go in there, and we were fortunate enough to go in there a little over a year ago, 14 months ago, in October of 2019. We took a group of about 15 of us in there to do a private tour. Nick, you were so kind enough, and the hospitality was absolutely fantastic. We took the Whiskey Thief, and we just started, thieving from different barrels. I can't tell you how excited I am for the blue popcorn. I'm actually sipping on the bottled in bond right now. I can't wait for a cask strength rye. I'm really, really excited for something like that.
I think Benny's has one of those. I think Benny's had one of those.
So we still have a couple, some big distilleries, but I really want to get to, while we have you on, being a craft distillery, one of the big things that was in the news lately, and let me pull it up here in my notes so that I don't botch the name, the Craft Beverage Modernization and Tax Reform Act. That is going to affect craft distilleries, craft breweries greatly. And it's obviously something that could very, very potentially affect Whiskey Acres. Talk to us about the tax side of things. What happens if this doesn't, if the, whatever they're nicknaming it, CMBTA or whatever it is, what happens if this doesn't pass going into 2021 for you guys?
Your whiskey gets more expensive. That's really the best way to tell you. So to really simplify this, we've got a standardized set of tax rates that we pay on what's called a proof gallon. And so just to get a little in the weeds here, imagine you've got a gallon jug of alcohol. A wine gallon is that's just a volumetric measurement of alcohol. It doesn't matter how concentrated it is. It's just a wine gallon. And that's how the state of Illinois taxes this. The federal government taxes us on something, bless you, Jeff, just a little wax hanging out, on something called a proof gallon. And a proof gallon is that same jug that's 50% alcohol or 100 proof. And we pay, the standard tax rate for that is $13.70. The federal excise tax, I don't even know what it's officially called, but essentially what a bill that was passed did was reduce that tax liability from $13.50 down to $2.70 on the first 100,000 gallons that are produced. And so anybody who identifies themselves as a craft distiller should be producing less than 100,000 gallons. So basically what that means is there's instead of paying $2 a bottle for tax, you're paying about 50 cents a bottle or less than that. And so that tax break is set to sunset on December 31st. And so $13.50 versus $2.70 is a big pile of money for knuckleheads like this guy and his business partners.
It's a 400% increase.
I was about to ask if this is the 400% increase tax issue that I've been seeing, other small distilleries, talking about like, hey, please help us stop this from happening.
Every distillery enjoys that tax break, so to speak, on the first 100,000 gallons. So all the big distilleries that you've talked about before I got on, and we'll talk about after I got on, have a tax break on their first 100,000. On gallon number 100,001, they're taxed at that full rate of $13.70. So they call it tax beverage or craft tax beverage modernization because it most significantly impacts the craft producers. There is bipartisan support on this. The issue is politics. There's not a bill to hitch this to. And so I got an email an hour or two ago that there's some optimism that it will be extended. and attached to an omnibus bill that's likely going to come out in the next day or two. But I can tell you that our reduction in tax that we've had from that 1370 or 1350 down to 270 is directly invested in staff, in production, and into the distillery. When and if that goes away, staff, production, and distillery investments will go away. That money has not been put in my pocket. I've not bought a new toy because of that. We have not done anything but invested into the business, and I can tell you that with a lot of certainty that that's pretty much how all of my peers in the business have been, dealing with this. And so, the punchline, Michael, is if there's folks listening or watching this, call your senator, call your congressman, tell them that this matters, because we're being taxed heavily as it is. Right. The $2.70 tax is a tax because they can do it. Right. Right. The $13 or $13.50 tax is a tax because they used to do it.
Nick, if I can ask a question here.
Yeah.
I was reading something in the last couple of days from a reputable news source, by the way, too, not just on Facebook. And it was talking about, food alcohol versus like fuel alcohol or something. And it was something like $27 versus like some crazy number, like sub $10 for food alcohol versus, like medicinal. I really wish I could remember exactly what it was. I was hoping kind of you knew what I'm referring to, and could, touch on that a little bit. And, also, calling a congressman and helping for the craft beverage, blah, 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 blah thing, how we can help you as a craft distiller.
So when you distill alcohol, just let's talk about bourbon or ethanol. Bourbon and ethanol are primarily made from corn in the United States. If I owned an ethanol facility and I were distilling corn, I'd be making bulk alcohol that's going to get denatured and turned into something that's going to go into our gas tanks. And that's going to be taxed very differently than the alcohol that would get distilled and get potentially transferred in bond to a distillery that would make a final consumable product from it. And so regardless of what is made, the government taxes how it's consumed on a different scale. And I don't know, I'm not sure what, if any, tax liability there is on a fuel ethanol production. I think those taxes come later, but fuel or corn alcohol production for consumption is taxed either that 270 or 1350, depending on the volume in which the distillery that's reporting those is utilizing the alcohol. So it's not a matter of what's made; it's a matter of how it's used. Right.
Interesting. Thank you.
And there is a link, by the way, at the top of the page under the announcement section under the Fox Valley Whiskey Society. We've got going on 1,800 people now membership in the group. It's a very, very easy link to click on. You click on it, you fill out your name and type in your email address and click send. It sends a very generic, 1 or 2 paragraph letter to your congressman here in Illinois, or I assume wherever you're at, letting them know that they really, 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 really need to pass this law. And Nick, I think you're right. I think it is going to be included in that omnibus legislation that's going to be passed hopefully here within the next couple of days, which also, by the way, includes some more money for us, the United States citizens. So I hope that gets passed, because as much as I love to support you guys, I don't want to have to pay more for this, but I will if I have to support you guys. So Nick, I want to thank you for coming on. We're going to keep going. Please keep watching. You guys out there, we still got a great viewership going. So you guys, please click the link at the top of the Fox Valley Whiskey Society page, fill out your name, your email address, send your congressman that note, that letter, just saying, we want this stuff to pass.
I want to interject one thing here while we're on this subject.
Yeah.
So if it's the same link that I've clicked on in the past, you can customize your message.
Yeah.
And the one thing I'm going to tell you, and I'm telling everybody this, I've worked in the congressional mailroom before. Be nice. Don't call them names. Don't be snarky. Be nice.
I
Exactly.
agree.
Like
I agree.
Jeff Schwartz is basically Patrick Swayze from Roadhouse.
What's that punches?
Yeah.
We're gonna rip out the
Be
throat.
nice.
Yeah.
Be nice.
Bye.
We're gonna talk about some more big releases in the craft industry. Nick, thank you so much for joining us. We'll talk soon
pleasure.
about our barrel pick coming up here within the next couple months or so.
We'll get to California ASAP.
I'll be in touch.
California ASAP. And
I love me some olive oil.
By the way, Nick, I'm moving out to South Carolina soon, so if you need some distribution, if you need some representatives out there in South Carolina, I'm your guy.
You're hired.
There you go.
We'll work for whiskey, right?
Yeah. Nick, thanks for coming on. We definitely love having you on. We love the conversation. We'll definitely talk to you soon.
Cheers.
Thanks for being our local distillery.
Cheers, Nick.
My pleasure. See y'all.
See you, Nick.
Salute.
All right, guys. So we'll talk a little bit about craft, more of the craft spirits here in just a second. I want to talk, but we'll go back to some of the bigger distilleries. We'll go back to Mikter's. Mikter's had a big release this year with the Mikter's Toasted Barrel Rye, which was a huge release. Everybody was talking about it. Restaurants were talking about it. Bars were talking about it. Social media was talking about it. Mikter's 10-year also came out this year, which is an annual release. We've got Angel's Envy, big things coming out of Angel's Envy, which is technically, I guess, really not considered a craft distillery anymore. Angel's Envy Cellar Collection number 2, which was finished in tawny port barrels. They had the Angel's Envy finished in Mizunara oak barrels.
I want that one so bad.
Yes, and we're going to talk about that. And then the 2020 Cask Strength, which came in at 120.4 proof. Pardon me. Mizunara oak. Japanese oak. Tree has to be at least 200 years old before it gets used for barrels. Marketing, legitimate. What are your thoughts?
So, having worked for a brand that worked with Mizunara, I did a stint working for a whiskey brand that was not exclusively, but heavily relied on Mizunara for marketing. Mizunara is not marketing if you're doing it correctly, which requires, oftentimes a longer finish. Quercus mongolica crispula, and I really dug nerdy into this because I wanted to dig into Mizunara really well when I worked on the book. It's not just a Japanese oak. It's actually more of a Mongolian oak, but it does grow in Japan, and it grows, on mountains, and it kind of grows to work with the wind, so it bends and twists and it knots. So for those who don't know, it's a really hard oak to work with in Cooper and making the barrels because of the fact that it bends and knots and twists a lot to, deal with the wind, buffering it. I think that's the word, right? Buffering? Buffering.
Yeah, softening it.
Be something or other.
Sure.
On the side of mountains, but that's where it's usually growing, on the sides of the mountains. It's heavily used in Japanese whiskey production. But the other thing to make note of Mizunara is that it's very porous and it leaks. A gentleman whom I worked with in the past told me that you would sometimes see puddles of whiskey underneath the barrel.
Oh.
It would leak.
So as Scotch guys, because I feel like this is used more in Scotch than it is, or Japanese whiskey than it is in bourbon, because I feel like it's still kind of relatively new to the United States. We don't see a whole lot of it being used. It's super expensive, right? So it's going to increase the price of the bottle. Dan, because you're going clockwise from where I'm at on screen, let's start with you. Thoughts on it? Is it adding anything flavor-wise? I mean, is it a noticeable flavor change to the bourbon, or is it more of the marketing side of things?
Well, never actually been able to enjoy anything that's aged in it, but from everything I've heard and read and people I know who I trust, it's a real thing. It really does make an impact. Just like French oak, you can taste the difference between something aged in French oak versus American oak, significantly different flavors. I think everything you hear about it is real. I'm sure there's a lot of marketing and hype that's coming along with it now because everything you want to get it into Mizunara oak and raise the price a couple $100. And, even if it just kind of brushes against the oak for a couple of days, they can say it's finished in Mizunara oak. And how old is that? How many times has that barrel been used? Has it been reused and reused? And so, yeah, there's going to be some marketing. You're going to have to be careful with what it is you're buying and trying, but it's a real thing from everything I've known, and people who I really trust in the industry swear that it's phenomenal if you get it done right, as Sam said.
Jeff, what do you think?
I'm in the same boat. I've never tried it, but people who I respect are impressed. And, I generally don't like to comment on things that I've never tried before, but people whose palates I trust say it's something special.
Sure.
So you guys actually all have had Mizunara without realizing it. It is a staple component in Hibiki Harmony is Mizunara oak aged whiskey.
Oh.
Yeah, I've not had that either.
Yep.
Well, so there's an Irish whiskey, and maybe Stephen, who I know who just texted me, who is obviously still awake. I want to say it was the Glendalough Mizunara
Cask 13-year-old.
It wasn't really my thing. I don't know. Maybe it was the Mizunara, maybe it was the mash, but I don't know what it was. It wasn't really my thing. I have not had the Angel's Envy regarding bourbon in Mizunara oak. I haven't had any bourbon aged or finished in it, so I can't really chime in that much. But hopefully some of you guys out there that are watching can chime in. Let's move to Wilderness Trail because they actually had a really big release this year. They're still kind of more on the craft side, but we're just introduced 2018, 2019 onto the Kentucky Bourbon Trail.
That's what I've been saying this entire time.
Pat Heist, absolutely brilliant mind. Our good friend Jared Smith down there, who we actually had on the Glasses Traveled on one of our episodes of Brand Ambassador. Wilderness Trail 6-year bourbon. Sam, go ahead. You've got it in front of you.
I mean, so this is actually the 6-year. Out in California, we just got the high rye, but there is a couple other different mash bills. I actually had the chance to chat with Dr. Pat a few months back, and there's a reason that I will give Wilderness Trail all of my money. Something you touched on that, relates to Wilderness Trail is that we don't want to have to pay more for our favorite bottles, but if we have to support the distillers we love, we will. And, that's how I feel about Wilderness Trail. Like Jeff, I get a lot of media samples sent to me. So oftentimes I get to try before I buy. And I have tried Wilderness Trail before I bought, and I'm in such love with it that I will continue to buy. The thing with Wilderness Trail is that there's not doing anything, crazy weird, but it's just solid liquid, a good mash bill. The transparency is nice. If you guys look at your bottles, depending on what it is, it'll tell you right here what the mash bill is. It'll be, part of the label. And that there's sweet mash instead of sour mash. So there's no, reuse of already fermented grain to kickstart. I haven't tasted a similar recipe, sweet versus sour mash, to compare the two, but I'd be really curious to. They're honest guys. And I read recently an article from some Kentucky outlet that basically said, these guys with Kentucky, hick accents are smarter than all of us put together.
Dr. Pat Heist, if you guys are Pat Heist, and his business partner, his name escapes me, but Jared our buddy that works down there, just absolutely phenomenal people. But they've been, when this was released, it was all over. I mean, liquor stores out here were talking about it. We have a place out here called the Beer Cellar, which primarily deals with beer, and they got it, and they were hyping it up. So it was super, super exciting to see what was coming out of them. New Riff, Let's talk about New Riff. They had their backsetter releases of both Bourbon and Rye, and we'll talk about what backsetter is here in just a second. The winter whiskey made with chocolate malted oat and chocolate malt. Dan, I believe you probably have that bottle, as a matter of fact, right in front of you. Two huge releases. New Riff is doing some really, really cool, interesting stuff. Jeff, you're familiar with the backsetter process, at least, of using old, what is it? Old, was it peated mash in the new, oh, for Christ's sake, why can't I remember what it is?
Well, I mean, usually I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but usually the backset is making the sour mash, where you're using some of the old stuff into the new to keep the consistency going.
Yeah, I think the backsetter, I think when the way that it is basically that it's a sour mash, but they're using peated mash, which wouldn't be their old stuff to keep consistency. It'd be to introduce some sort of peated mash to the overall final component.
And I've had some peated ryes and I've had some peated bourbons. I'm a big fan of peat, and I haven't tasted one that's bad. So I've not tasted the New Riff, but I'm interested.
Was it and Dan, you and I, before everybody got on, we were talking about this, because there's been so many new releases this year, because we try so many things. Was it the backsetter? Is the New Riff Maltster? Is that what I'm thinking of? Was that the one that was like the peated? It was like the peated version of the bourbon and the peated version of the rye. Whoever is watching this or listening to this, by the way, please correct us. I know Mark Augustin is probably one of those that watches regularly. One of them that we tried it at the Orlando's house. Do you remember that? We tried that we just didn't really care for. Was it the Maltster, or was it?
It was that Maltster backsetter, whichever one. Like Maltster, but yeah, and I don't know if I didn't like it as much because it was one of about 300 bottles we tried that night, or a typical night over there. I mean, we definitely don't. Everyone comes with more than we need to drink, so we usually try a lot, so it gets crazy.
Usually,
but yeah,
usually those are pretty wild nights. So New Riff had some great stuff coming out. I have a New Riff pick behind me that came from our good friend Dan Johnson down there in Louisville. Just some kind of miscellaneous releases this year. Kentucky Owl Dry State, which is a sourced whiskey, which is owned by Stoli Group, which had a $1,000 MSRP. That was released this year as well. Blade and Bow 22 year, which is distilled at the old Schlitzel-Weller distillery and owned by Diageo. Midwinter Night's Dram Act 8, which is High West. Those are also released this year. Midwinter Night's Dram is one that is very highly coveted. People are going after it. The Blade and Bow 22, I didn't really see as much hype about on social media. No. Kentucky Owl Dry State, I saw a couple stores that even had it, on Facebook and on Instagram. Not a lot of hype around that one, probably just because of its $1,000 MSRP.
Well, that and I think people have gotten burned a lot on Kentucky Owl. Their rye has been stupendous, particularly batch 1. But the other stuff that they've come up with, Confiscated, and I'm trying to think of a few others, were very expensive and very mediocre.
Yeah.
And I think it's a tough sell to come up and say, hey, we've got $1,000 whiskey here, buy it, and they don't have the reputation behind that to support it.
Right. I'll be honest, I haven't had anything from Kentucky Owl that I've actually enjoyed. Maybe it's my palate. I don't know. Nothing that I've had from them, I've been like, oh, I have to buy this. So those were just some randoms. We already talked about some of the craft whiskey. We had obviously Nick on from Whiskey Acres talking about the bottled and bond and the blue popcorn. Chattanooga whiskey, they've been getting a ton of attention lately with their cask strength. I've actually got a sample of that behind me. A fun one out here in the Midwest, Jeff, I know you've heard of them. Jepson's came out with who makes Malort. Yep. Came out with a single barrel release of their bourbon. Binny's has done single barrels with them. Apparently, they're actually pretty good.
I got to taste their bourbon this week. I tasted their bourbon for the first time on Monday.
I've heard it's actually not bad. I know most of it. I know it's MGP, or I'm sorry, is it still Chicago Distilling?
No, I believe it's MGP.
Okay.
But regardless, I was pleasantly surprised. I went in there expecting to hate it, and I didn't. And I thought it was very nice, lots of caramel, but it's a quality whiskey.
I'll be honest with you. I think, what is it, like $22, something like
It's
that?
Yeah.
I'm not going to, I'm one of the few people in Illinois that enjoys Malort, as it is. So I'm not going to say no to their
Californian here who enjoys Malort.
Thank you,
You're one
Sam.
of the few people
Thank you. One of the few people probably in the world, really. So Chattanooga whiskey, we have Jeppson's that came out with a single barrel. We've also got, and again, I know I already mentioned them, Spirits of French Lick down there in Indiana. They're Maddie Gladden. They're Lee W. Sinclair. They've got some new releases. There's some really cool things that Alan Bishop is doing down there in southern Indiana that I'm really excited for. We've also got Widow Jane, which is part of the Few umbrella that just released a 15-year. The big one.
That's the vault, right?
Yes, yeah. That one that's retailing for like $200 some odd, something like that. But the big one this year that I'm seeing everywhere, and I'm seeing barrel picks of it that everybody is doing, is 1-8 Distillery out of Washington, D.C. They're Untitled. Very, very nondescript. Not a fancy bottle, not a fancy label, but I'm seeing them everywhere. MGP sourced, relatively high age statement at 13 to 15 plus years. Really, really, really great whiskey. I'm curious as to your guys' thought, because MGP, it's getting harder and harder to find that 13, 15, 16, 17-year-old stuff. It's getting a little bit younger and younger every year going into the 9, 8, 6 year. Are we going to start to see the sourced whiskeys that are, from 1-8, from all these other distilleries? Are we going to start to see them kind of fade away and going into 2021, 22? Are we finally going to start to see some of these craft distilleries with their own stuff that's not sourced?
They have to do it. And the big question is can they do it? There is obviously a huge difference between sourcing stuff, building your name on being a good barrel picker, and then being a good distiller. Does that transfer over? And it doesn't always work. And a big one on that is Old Scout, Smooth Ambler.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic pickers. And when they came out with that yearling, that was awful.
That's exactly what I was going to say. That's the first one that came to mind, and I have the yearling, and I bought it, and I drank one glass, and it still sits there.
Yep.
Maybe they get better. Maybe they learn.
And I don't know that I would trust them to buy a bottle of their own distillate, but if they're sourcing it, buy it all day long.
On that same note, Blue Run.
Who's Blue Run?
So Blue Run is a new sourced bourbon with Rutledge's name attached to it. It's coming from an ex-Nike designer and one of the first director-level people from Facebook. And right now, it's a 13-year sourced Kentucky straight bourbon in a very fancy bottle. I mean, the bottle looks beautiful. I say fancy not in a bad way. But again, like Jeff was saying, you're going to have to start now. They're laying down liquid right now, but 22, 23, even let's say 23, there's not going to be that 13-year-old liquid anymore. Everyone wants it. And, people are buying probably barrels now that are 9, 10, 11 years old and just letting them sit there until they're 13, 14, 15 years old.
Right. I'm curious as to your thought, and I didn't put this on the notes, which obviously you guys know. I send everything to you guys so that you know what we're talking about, and I totally forgot to add this. 2020 was the year of celebrity whiskey, was it not?
Oh, God, do we have to?
I mean, is it? you've got Terry Bradshaw. You've got
now I've heard that's good.
Peyton Manning. I heard Peyton Manning's was pretty good. I heard Terry Bradshaw's pretty good. You've got the Metallica, which I hear is pretty good. It's another
I
base.
actually like Blackened.
And they're coming out with more stuff. They're coming out with new expressions. Belfour. You've got Heaven's Door.
Bob Dylan. Yeah.
Is it the year of celebrity whiskey?
No.
I mean, obviously, this
I hope so, because that'll mean 2021 it'll be gone.
Yeah, right. Exactly. I mean, obviously, this is just another thing
it's not just celebrity whiskey. Gordon Ramsay just released a line of hard seltzer. And I'm telling you right now, if it doesn't call me a donkey or an idiot sandwich when I open it, I don't want it. What are you? An idiot sandwich. That's right.
Yeah.
Celebrity spirits are skyrocketing right now. Coming from the beverage industry myself, I work in bars and restaurants on premise. The Rock has Terramont tequila.
Yeah.
Like I said, Gordon Ramsay's hard seltzer. There's Bob Dylan's Heaven's Door.
Michael Jordan has a tequila.
Everyone and their mother seemingly has a tequila. George Clooney's tequila Casamigos. Let's look at that for a second here. Well, it may not be the first one. It was probably the first to get like a massive deal. And then didn't Diageo just buy like Aviation out like a few months ago?
I was just going to say that.
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds they just bought for a huge sum of money. But George Clooney made like at one point, I think they sold for, what did they sell for?
Billions.
Like $3 billion they sold for was Casamigos. And we did a dinner with them. We did a private dinner with Casamigos at a local restaurant here a few miles down the road. It's a great product. And then you've got the Jonas Brothers. One of the Jonas Brothers is coming out with a tequila. It's unbelievable.
Are they even still relevant? I'm sorry, but I'm sure Jonas Brothers growing up.
Yeah, it's weird and strange and just kind of it's a bit much. It's
the problem with the Jonas Brothers is they're relevant to people that aren't old enough to drink. So
right. So who are they selling to?
So here's what I propose: Hannah Montana vodka.
Yeah.
Here's what I propose that we do. The four of us, we start a distillery, and we immediately reach out to Stoli and Constellation and all them and say, we've got this great distillery. It's for sale. I think $4 billion is probably a good price. We'll split it 4 ways. And we cannot do this anymore.
Why not?
Yeah, your first mistake was wanting to start a distillery rather than just, going to someone else and being like, yeah, I want to relabel your juice.
Yeah. Let's talk about we'll talk about some more real quick here before we get into
I watched Knash. It's not that hard to create a still.
Yeah. They can do it in the Army. We can do it here. So let's talk about some real quick distillery.
Famous last words. Sorry, but famous last words.
Journeyman Distillery out here in Michigan was picked up by a huge distribution company that's actually owned by Sazerac. 375 Park Avenue Spirits will bring Journeyman to all 50 states. Spirit Works Distillery out by you, which in Sebastopol, California. Sam just won Distillery of the Year by the American Distilling Institute. There's so much that's happening in craft distilling. COVID aside, obviously COVID is shuttering and closing a lot of these craft distilleries, but there's still a lot of fantastic things happening in the craft distillery world, and that's where I kind of try to focus on with the glass less traveled.
I'm going to disagree with you there. Actually, I don't feel like COVID is shuttering distilleries. I feel like distilleries are thriving during COVID because they're able to just focus on production almost 24/7.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like COVID is actually closing, bars and restaurants more than
a lot of breweries too. Unfortunately, yeah, it's closing, especially out by us here in Chicago, closing a lot of breweries. I think when it comes to COVID, obviously, the number one issue with distilleries is on premise, right, and distribution. The big five in Kentucky, they have no problem. Buffalo Trace and Heaven Hill don't need my money. It's places like and Chattanooga. Those are the places that need our money. So those are the places to support. But there's so much news in the craft industry world that it's just too much to cover right now. Let's get into, and this is where I'm going to pour myself something and I'm just going to listen. Scotch, Irish, Global. What happened in 2020? You three, go.
Well, I mean,
I don't even know.
before we even get started on 2020, we need to wind back to 2019, where the current administration imposed a huge tax on
tariff.
Scotch. Yes. Exactly, the tariff. Thank you. On Scotch whiskey, and I believe Irish whiskey as well. Now, a lot of distillers and importers are like, okay, well, let's buy 5, 10, 12, whatever number of pallets in advance to try last us until. I gotta take out this one earbud because I feel like I'm yelling. Am I yelling or is it just me?
No, you sound good.
No, you're good.
Okay, well,
you're good.
I'll put this back in then. So they purchased more than they normally would to try and counteract the tariff to not to raise prices. For instance, JVS Imports and Impacts Beverages, who handle Kilchoman, Pandaren, Golden Carus, and they actually do Single Cask Nation as well. They purchased pallets in advance to try and counteract it, and had agreed to, and had not even agreed, but promised to their consumer, their direct purchaser, not the end consumer, but the direct purchaser, that they would eat the tariff for X period of time, which I thought was really admirable of them. Because it's like, all right, we know this is going to hit all of you hard. We're going to eat this tariff for a short period of time to try and ease the transition a little bit.
Jeff, what about you? What was the big thing in 2020? Whether it was news or whether it was a big release for Scotch Irish Global. Dan, I know you've got something in front of you that you have been. Did you open it yet?
I have. And speaking of Impacts Beverages, Milk and Honey.
Milk and Honey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is a Israeli, if I'm correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah, and to just piggyback real quick on what Sam was saying is like the funny thing is about those tariffs, it's about a battle between two airlines. It has nothing to do with whiskey.
Beverage alcohol industry at all.
Right. It's about and it's crushing hospitality across the world. Like, it's not just impacting America. It's world, because we're fighting back with our own tariffs and blah blah blah, and it's only on single malt. It's not blended whiskey, so Johnny Walker is fine. But yeah, it's the weirdest thing, and it's about airlines. It has nothing to do with whiskey. But yeah, and that's what I think. My thing is like, Scotch is Scotch. It's been there. It's great. There's some new distilleries. You got master distillers or distillery managers changing. But I think what's exciting is the global, like what's happening in Taiwan and Japan and India and Israel, and Irish whiskey is really starting to become extremely popular. I know, Jeff, you had said that's your latest thing.
Yeah, I'm on a kick right now for Irish whiskey, and the cool thing about 2019, 2020, this is a category that was near death not too many years ago. And you had a lot of Irish whiskey distilleries that have been online and are now finally releasing their own stuff.
I've got some Glendalough right here.
Well, I have two here that are pretty cheap and fantastic. This one is called the Busker. And they have 4 different expressions. They've got a single grain, a single malt, and a single pot still. And then they've got a 4th that's a blend of the 3. And I've only had the single pot still and the blend. And for the 20 some odd bucks that a bottle costs, it's pretty mind blowing. The other distillery that's really knocking my socks off is the Dublin Liberties. And these are the same guys who do Dead Rabbit, and they are sourcing some amazing stuff and doing a lot of fun things with finishes. And I just got to tell you, Irish whiskey right now is really exciting. There's a lot world whiskeys. I mean, the India is doing some amazing stuff. As,
Paul John.
Sam said, it's Taiwan. It's everywhere. French.
No, Dan mentioned Taiwan, but on the topic of Taiwan, real quick, Kavalan's former master blender Ian Chang just signed a contract for the Kurizawa distilling company or something like that to move to Japan and be the president and master blender and distiller. So that's another thing happening in COVID. Kavalan lost their master blender.
I was unaware that Ian Chang left, so that's just heard it here first.
No, there's a lot of movement and a lot of exciting things going on with world whiskeys right now.
Yeah,
in Ireland, there's Teeling Black Pits, the second peated Irish whiskey to come to the U.S.
Oh,
yeah.
So what do you think that's going to do for for sales here in the United States? I mean, are we going to start to see, there's this thought process that Scotch is king in the world of whiskey. Scotch is king. There's really, and people in the bourbon industry will kind of dispute that and they'll doubt that and they'll say, oh well, it's not king. But really, when you look at worldwide sales, it almost is.
Yeah.
Do you think we're going to?
And when you look at it,
go ahead, Dan.
Let's to be clear. Blended Scotch is king. Like everyone talks about single malt, but blended Scotch outsells it like 10-1.
Yeah, and usually it's those lower end.
It's 70% of Scotch is blended.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Do you think we're going to start to see, or do you think we'll ever see a boom here with international whiskeys, Kavalan, Australian, like Starward, here in the States?
Yes.
I think we'll see an increase.
An increase for sure. Is it going
to
be?
I don't know if I'd say a boom. Yeah, I wouldn't claim.
I think it's a matter of being discovered. I mean, it's even you've got Amaret, you've got Paul John, you've got I think the third one is Rampur. These guys are just Indian whiskey is brand new. They've not been around all that long. They're coming into their own. They are producing some amazing things. Milk and Honey, or M&H as they like to be called, doing some really good things. Starward is doing some really good things, but they're not on anyone's radar. And
right. I mean, Starward's just getting big enough to finally, hire somebody else here on the West Coast. It used to be, Jake Hookey covering the entire country. And now they finally were able to hire someone here on the West Coast to cover, like, California.
Mm.
Yeah.
Which is a massive market. You realize how big California is compared to Wisconsin.
Oh, no, I know how big California is compared to Wisconsin. But, these things are coming out in their own and waiting to be discovered. And, waiting for, I hate to say this, but waiting for Minnick to say, hey, this is whiskey of the year.
Yeah.
Or something of that. It's not going to take much for people to go out and get interested in it.
Can we go to a semi-controversial topic for a few moments, gentlemen?
Sure.
Is the controversial topic Minnick?
Is it?
No.
Yeah, right.
It's related to Minnick. Jim Murray.
No.
He was, so we'll keep it brief because we want to keep our we want to keep somewhat viewership. So for those who are unaware, in the news in 2020 was Jim Murray's rather sexist comments and writings in the Whiskey Bible for 2020. Whether you agree or not, that's neither here nor there.
It's irrelevant.
We will get to, regarding that topic, we will get to here in just a moment, lists, best of lists, and we'll kind of touch on the Jim Murray and whether or not these lists are accurate. I want to talk about arguably in the United States, the biggest release of the year obviously comes around September, October, and that is the BTAC, the Buffalo Trace Antique Collection, and the Pappy. The Pappy yield this year was significantly smaller than in previous years. This whole Pappy thing, is it here to stay? Are we going to ever see other brands, get into the the BTAC realm, into the Pappy realm, or
Sure.
are they just always going to reign king?
You know, every kingdom falls, but it's so hype driven right now. There are bottles of Pappy that nobody's drinking. They just get bought and sold and bought and sold and bought and sold. So it's a commodity. It's not something to drink. And that's a shame. Can somebody else pop in and do that? Sure. And it'll happen the same way that Pappy did, which used to be shelf turds. You know, it's nothing's really changed with it, but it took somebody saying, "Hey, this is my whiskey of the year," and bam, suddenly you can't get it anymore, and the price.
Yes, I want to ask you about that. You know, as someone who only started drinking in 2013, so 7 years ago was my first drink, and really didn't discover whiskey until, you know, about a year or two later. And, you know, Mike or Dan, please chime in here. How the fuck, pardon my French, but how the fuck did Pappy become Pappy?
Because it was named Whiskey of the Year. Good. I think by Murray.
And yeah, and it was given and this is the other thing we'll talk about lists is the 100-point scale, right? You know, you've got which is and Jeff, I see you shaking. It's total bullshit. It's really a 21-point scale. The lowest that you can get is a 79.
It's a 3-point scale,
right? You know, so when you say, "Oh, I got 89,"
maybe
you got to
no.
Yeah, it's just
I've heard, like, so two things. First of all, when it comes to rating like points, the best comment I heard was from a whiskey writer who said, "Trust the notes, not the number." So if someone's reviewing a thing and these are my tasting notes, don't worry about what they rank it. If their tasting notes and what they're getting aligns with what you like, then you'll like it.
Exactly.
As far as like for me, when Pappy became Pappy, I started getting into whiskey back in 2011, 2012, just prior to the explosion. And I remember getting into it and getting on the internet, and just Googling what is the best bourbon. And I got a list of like 20 bourbons, and it listed Pappy Van Winkle was actually rated number 1. Never heard of it in my life. You know, back then the whiskey section was 4 feet, and like the coolest bottle on the shelf was Woodford Reserve. So I'm like, that was my experience with it. And I remember being on a hunt for it at that time. I've got to find this Pappy thing. And so I called a couple liquor stores, like, yeah, it comes in the fall, we get it, but and I got a couple of bottles back then, and now I wish I would have bought like a case, but I didn't know that it would be what it was. And like 2 years later, when I'm like, this is really good stuff, and I went to find it, and they're like, oh no, you got to be on a list. So I think that's for me, it was the internet. Yeah, that's what introduced me to it. But it's probably like Jeff said, a list.
So when we talk about those lists, and we'll get to that here, I guess we'll just get to it. So Whiskey Advocate just recently named the best of 2020 list, and it ranked the Larceny batch A120 Whiskey of the Year. Obviously, I think at a certain point we kind of all know whether it's us four or the other people out there in whiskey world. It really has to do with how much money are you paying the magazine? How much money are you paying in advertising to put your advertisements in Whiskey Advocate magazine so that they're going to rank you number 1? Most people almost unanimously across social media, which let's face it, is really kind of the bar to set, right? If people on social media like it, then it's good. Most people, even who we'll talk about here in just a second, Matt Porter of ADHD Whiskey, was like, it's not my whiskey of the year. Got some Bourbon Pursuit. It's not my whiskey of the year. It's certainly not my whiskey of the year. How much of
my whiskey of the year? I haven't even had it yet.
How much of these lists though?
I think
are just advertising and money versus actual legitimate. Oh yes, I really like this.
Well, I can answer this because I have my own list, which is coming out very shortly. And as I think everybody knows, I don't do any advertising at all. I don't even do paid for click. I don't do affiliate links. This is just me. And I have my own weird way of doing lists. And my lists are it's got to be affordable, it's got to be attainable, and it can't be allocated. So Pappy will never appear on my list. Not that it's not good. It's just, to me, a best of list should be something that's attainable.
Right.
You're never going to get it. And, you know, Sam's never going to get it. And I'm never going to get it, you know, unless it's dumb luck. But, you know, something that everybody can get, to me, that's a useful list. My list is a useful list. It's been a useful list every year I've put it out.
I agree.
And this year is going to be no different. You know, what can Joe's six-pack go out and buy? And the other half of it is, why are you naming a $1,500 bottle of whiskey of the year?
Right.
Nobody can afford that.
Right.
You know, it's stupid.
Let's just get one thing clear here. I don't think any of us have anything ill against Whiskey Advocate. You know, they put on Whiskey Fest every year, and I'm sure all of us have enjoyed it at one time or another before COVID.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with it. I just look at it as, to me, a best of list needs to be useful. And if all you've got on there are unicorns and you know, things that you need to take a second mortgage out on, what's the point?
Jeff, can you give us a spoiler about at least one thing that's on your list, even if it's number 20?
Yes, I will. I will tell you what and I don't go 20 deep. I go bourbon, American rye, American whiskey, Scotch, Irish, and world whiskey. So I will, and this year I added a Santa item. And the Santa item is, it violates all my rules. And I put the Glendronach Kingsman edition on there. And that is very likely the best whiskey I've ever had, ever.
Really?
Yeah. It's $1,300.
I'm sorry, it's how much?
$1,300.
Okay. So
I'm never gonna, that's why it's on my Santa list. I'm never gonna buy it.
Right.
There is nothing that would make me go into the store and say, here's $1,300 that I have burning a hole in my pocket. Yeah, no. Let's buy it. If somebody gave it
never
to me,
say never, Jeff.
Yeah.
Okay, well, when I'm a multi-billionaire,
there you go.
Because we've sold our
distillery. Sold our distillery.
No. Then I will buy it by the case. But I mean, I've had much older whiskeys. I've had much more expensive whiskeys. I've never had a whiskey as good as that was.
So if we ever get a sample of it, long or the short, drink it.
If you see that one at a bar and it's $100 a pour,
buy it.
Spend $100.
Buy it.
All right.
I'm with Jeff on this one. The 1989 Kingsman is fan-fucking-tastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. One that Dan and I will probably never have a chance to come across.
As Steve pointed out, Joe Sixpack was my professional wrestling name. So thanks, Steve, for that shout out. But if I could go back, my opinion on the Whiskey Advocate list is, I look at Whiskey Advocate as primarily a single malt and a Scotch magazine. Like,
yes,
I've been a subscriber for years, and it's always been single malt focused. And when you look at their top 20 whiskey list, I believe it's 4 of the top 5 are bourbons, which to me, I think at that point they're pandering to subscribers. It's not necessarily about you know, who's advertising. It's how can we get our subscribers to buy more magazines? How can we sell this issue?
Bourbon is happening right now. Let's name.
I look at that list and I look at like 10 through 20 or 11 through 20, and I think that's where the real gems are. Those are the real ones. I'll even point this out. I got on there and I got on my rant on Facebook about how, you know, this is all it's bourbon, and I love bourbon. I'm not saying anything against bourbon. It's just for a magazine that's mostly a single malt and a Scotch magazine to have 4 of the top 5 be bourbons. I think there's something amiss. And I said, you're missing things like Milk and Honey is out there and it's a great distillery and no one's paying attention. And then they went and put it, I think, number 20 on their list. So, that's where I think when you look at their 20 through 11, I think that's where the real gems are of their list. So I think they almost need to reverse it.
Yeah. I think what you have to do is look at lists that are very specific to the style, right? You know, it's kind of, like I said, it's almost disingenuous for the whiskey advocate who's, like you said, very single malt and Scotch oriented to say like, well, this is the best bourbon. I would more trust, you know, Breaking Bourbon or Bourbon Pursuit, or, you know, these reviewer, like, you know, you like Jeff, that reviews a lot of bourbon, to say like, you know, because your palate aligns a lot with mine when it comes to bourbon. I would trust those sources that are really focused on bourbon versus those that are focused on single malts and Irish and Scotch. You know, to say, oh, well, we as Whiskey Advocate, we've named this bourbon. Well, you guys have been focused for years and years and years and years and years on this other thing. So me personally, I would take someone else's word for it versus, you know, and I think why a lot of people in the bourbon community were like, what? Like, why would, like, of all the things that came out this year, that was the one that you picked?
Well, it's not any different from Crown Royal, Northern
Harvest Rye.
Yeah.
The
Jamur.
Yeah.
I think everyone has a reviewer they like. There are reviewers out there who tell it like it is, and they give you the truth. And if they like it, they like it. If they don't, they don't.
Yep.
You find the one that you like. You find the one whose tastes align with you, and that's who you trust.
Jeff, you posted.
And I've been saying that same thing for years.
Jeff, you posted your article on the Fox Valley Whiskey Society, 7 things you wish you knew. What was the 7 things you wish you knew?
Things whiskey reviewers wish things we wish you knew about whiskey reviewers.
And that was one of them, is that find a whiskey reviewer whose tastes align with yours and take their word for it, because you're going to find something that you like. And that
most of what they recommend, you'll like.
Right. So not those of you who are watching or listening, if you find a whiskey reviewer and you like the things that they have recommended, those are the people to go back to.
It's the same concept of finding a bartender you trust. Tell them what you like,
right?
And they'll pour you stuff you're going to like.
Right.
Go to a store where the owner or the manager knows what you like and knows their stuff, and that's how you don't get burned. But we've all been burned.
Working in bars, is that going to find people whiskey they like?
Yes, and you've worked in. I mean, is it tough for you to find? I mean, obviously, people come in and they say, okay, I like this, and this, and then boom, you just go, okay, this is something that you're going to like.
No. So the bar I worked at pre-COVID had a crazy selection that I was still working on memorizing. So I want to go to the bar before that. Let's just call it Beverly Hills. Because that's where it was located. So Beverly Hills, I was the whiskey sommelier. I basically ran the whiskey program. The owner would call me at all hours a day. Sam, we have an option to buy this rare bottle. Should we do it? Nah, it's okay, but it's not worth the money. And when guests would come in, I'd go to them like, hey, welcome, how you doing? Here's the menu, blah, blah, blah. What can I get you? They're like, well, we don't really know. I'm like, all right, cool. Answer these questions. I'm going to do a little quiz for you. There's no yes or no answer. You have to give me like more exact answers. First of all, do you like it smokier or sweeter? If they said smoky, I would say, how smoky do you want it? Do you want it? And I wouldn't tell it to them. I'd be like, do you want, Octomore 8.4? Or do you want, like Glendronach with like a waft of peat? And they'd be either like, oh yeah, give me the smokiest thing you have. Or, I'm okay with a little smoke, but I don't like a lot of it. And that would determine then, what I would go for. And then the next question would be do you have a region you want? If they would say, I want to stay in Scotch. Sometimes I have to walk over to the cabinet and, at Beverly Hills, I tried almost everything there. Thankfully, I was bringing in, ambassadors to come and taste me and the staff. So I would be able to have a point of reference for everything. And sometimes, it would be like, oh, I know exactly what I'm going to give you before they even finish their sentence. And sometimes I'd have to think about it for a minute. And most of the time, that little quiz that I wish I had recorded it because I can't remember exactly how I did it, resulted in oh my God, this is perfect. Thank you so much.
Yep. And I used to do the same thing when I was at a liquor store where you could taste almost everything. And the same thing is you'd ask them questions. You narrow it down, try this. They try it, they go, wow, that's fantastic. And they'd buy a bottle.
Or
But
it takes so good, but it's not what I was looking for. To do something slightly similar but different.
Correct. Or you can go, okay, no, this is too sweet. I wanted a little less sweet than this. Okay, great.
No problem. I know exactly what to give you.
Yep. But it's a matter of the person giving the advice, listening to the person telling them what they want, rather than you deciding, I'm going to sell you this because this is being pushed.
Dan,
I never gave a shit about what was being pushed. Very rarely do we everything that was being pushed at Beverly Hills. We had shit in the cocktails that was being pushed. But I would always go for pretty much the same cocktail, which was a penicillin, actually. They're like, what do you reckon? I'm like, I love the penicillin. It's smoky and sweet. It's perfect. And people get mad when you talk about smooth or sweet or delicate and balanced with a whiskey. I say, go away. I don't like describing a whiskey as smooth particularly, but if I need to describe the texture of it as smooth, I will.
Yep.
One of my favorite whiskeys to recommend, going back to world whiskey, was Amroot Intermediate Sherry. And a colleague of mine, a friend, and someone who works with me on some of my, my live streams, I recommended him Amroot Intermediate Sherry, and he is in love with that bottle and is devastated when I told him that they discontinued it.
Dan and I just like cheap whiskey. What's not going to burn a hole?
Black.
Yeah, what's not going to what's going to get me drunk?
Kesslers.
Kesslers. Yeah.
Stillhouse.
You're going to need that high
Kirkland brand blended Scotch whiskey. There you go. You can buy it in the literal handle.
Yeah, from Costco.
Fleischmann's $2 a handle.
Fleischmann. Yeah, that's
too much a handle. I'm scared of that.
Right. One of the big things this year was obviously social media, whether it be Facebook or Instagram or Twitter, but Reddit. And I'm not even on Reddit. I think I'm too old to be on Reddit. But the big thing this year that kind of came out this summer, and Bourbon Junkies covered it on YouTube, pretty much every YouTuber covered it, was your top 5 must-have bourbons. And I covered it very briefly. Came from Reddit. It was a top 5 must-have bourbons, and it was basically, what's your everyday drinker? What's your, when guests come over, what's your high-end, what's your cocktail mixer, and what's your special occasion, right? Jeff, I know you and I agree, our house, Evan Williams, Bottled and Bond.
Absolutely.
Our everyday go-to. It's a phenomenal bourbon. I'm curious, Dan, let's start with you. We're going to do your house, your cocktail, your high-end. Shit, I forgot what they were already.
What you would give your guests and
what do you house? So your house. What's your everyday drinker? What's your cocktail? What's your what are you going to give your guests? What's your high end? That's 4. There was another one. There was a 5th on there, but the top 5 was a really big subject within social media, at least, which has kind of helped expand everybody's viewpoint on whiskey, at least in general. What is your?
I think.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I remember when I answered this, I jokingly answered everyone was a bottle of different variation of wild turkey.
That's true.
I agree with you. I know Jeff said that he doesn't have a decanter. I have a decanter that I pour a bottle of Evan Williams White Label into, and that is my go-to. If someone's coming over, I pour you a Bottle and Bond, Evan Williams Bottle and Bond. I love that whiskey. It's a great affordable. It's very good. Lots of good flavors. It's an easy one to share. If a cocktail whiskey, I would probably go with a rye, and I would probably do Wild Turkey 101. It's got a good proof or I would go with like an Old Grandad 114.
So by the way, I just pulled it up here. So the list was your daily drinker, for guests, cocktail mixer, Friday nights, and special occasion. So for me, I think my list was, for my daily drinker was Evan Williams Bottled and Bond, 100 proof. For guests, I actually did a store pick. I think for me, for guests, when people come over, they know that I have a collection, I want to give them something that maybe they haven't had before, or something that they didn't know about. So for me, giving them a store pick, especially people that don't know all that much about bourbon, I think giving them a store pick of something that's very unique is kind of special. My cocktail mixer, 1792 small batch, I think is just I don't particularly like it on its own, but I think for a cocktail is really good. Friday nights is barrel proof. Friday nights for me is like, let's get lit. Like I don't have to work tomorrow, so let's let's do it. And then my special occasion is this bottle right here. This is the Jim Beam Pinball. This is a Jim Beam Pinball.
Wow.
Early 1980s. Dan, you actually had a chance to try this.
Yeah.
Not too long ago. But those are like my special occasion is something that I have that you'll literally never have again. Right. So those are my old vintages. Those are the old collectibles. Those are the ones, like behind me, I've got my, the Wild Turkey right here. Daily drinker, for guests, cocktail, Friday night, special occasion. Those are the 5. Jeff, we know Evan Williams for you. For guests, like say somebody does come over, or you go over to somebody's home for a special occasion, COVID aside, what are you going to bring as far as bourbon goes for guests?
If I'm going to somebody's house, I'm with you. I'm bringing a store pick, and very likely I'm bringing something that I picked.
Okay.
If somebody's coming over to my house, I open up my whiskey closet and I go, pick what you want. I don't care if it's $5 or $500. It doesn't matter. As far as what goes into a cocktail, I admittedly don't do a whole lot. When I do, it's old fashions, but rye tends to be better in cocktails, in my opinion, than bourbon does. Special occasion bottle would be the first store pick I ever had, which I have a bottle and a half of left. I only drink off of it once a year. And that was picked on my wedding anniversary. It's Four Roses OBSO. It's a I want to say it's a 10-year, and it's still probably the best thing I ever picked. But I want that. I toast my anniversary with that every year. Every so often I'll get into it more than once a year, but every September 28th, that's what I drink.
What about your Friday night? Rough week at work, you're like, oh, Jesus Christ. We're talking like, for me, it's Elijah Craig barrel proof. So we're talking like Friday night high proof, barrel strength, cask strength, real kind of, get you in the gut kind of stuff.
I've got a backbone bourbon barrel proof it's a store pick.
Okay, yeah.
And it's a knock your socks off one. I mean, granted it's MGP, but it's barrel proof, and yeah, if I've had a rough day, that's the one that I'm going for more times than not.
Dan, we'll finish with you with I think we got a little bit of your top 5. Sam, daily drinker, guests, cocktail, Friday night, special occasion. Daily drinker.
I don't know. It varies. Like, it really does vary. I could be drinking, Wilderness Trail 6-year one day, and then, RC6 the next day, and the next day after that. And then one day it's like, all right, you know what? I'm bored of everything, like the 12 bottles I have littered around my desk when I'm playing World of Warcraft at night. Let's go to the old and rare cabinet and pull out, Glenmorangie 16 Menotane 15 year from, the early 2000s.
What about let's say you have a house party for guests. I want you to try this.
No, those are very different questions. Do I have 1 or 2 guests over, or am I having a small gathering, a small party?
Let's just say a small party, stuff that you want somebody to enjoy.
Cool. So I'll bring out stuff like the Wilderness Trail, things that are more easily attainable, that aren't, super expensive, that I want my friends to enjoy. Either they've had it before, or they've never had it. If they've had it before, fantastic. I know they like it, or they've never had it. And then I will bring out later, something old and rare, it's like, and pour, a small taste for each of them.
What about your Friday night? Let's hear about your Friday night. What's your like? Oh God, this week sucked. Let's get
super high proof, super cask strength.
Yeah,
I don't know what it is, but it's something barrel proof.
Dan, what about you? I know you're a daily drinker. I know you've got in a decanter upstairs.
Yeah, I think. Well, I mean, I would say Evan Williams Bottle and Bond is an easy one to say, and I think it's been mentioned a couple times. It's just a good classic whiskey. If for guests coming over, I would go with a Russell Reserve single barrel, preferably a store pick. I think it's an easy drink. I think it's got a lot of sweetness to it that people enjoy. Cocktail, again, I'd go with a rye, and I'd probably do Wild Turkey 101. Yes, I have a distillery bias. And what were the other two? If I was having
Friday night
cocktail,
Friday night, same
and
thing,
special
everything
occasion.
else. A barrel proof, and one of the ones that I've kind of gotten turned on to recently was 1792 full proof, which I had a bottle and really didn't drink a whole lot of until we did that.
Tasting.
And I'm like, holy crap, this is a lot better than I thought it was. And it's not necessarily easily attainable, but it's out there. And special occasion, I have, if it's a special occasion for me, I've got several options in the Scotch world that I would drink. A lot of independent bottlers that I have collected over the years. Well, if I had that, I would drink that. But I have
on my wedding day.
I have a bottle that I bought about 3 of once I realized how good it was. It's a distillery called Tamdhu.
Yes.
And it's a Signatory, which is an independent bottler. I believe it's 10 years old, and it was a sherry cask finish, and it is stunning. It was actually picked by a person, don't know her last name. First name is Monique, and I believe she's based in Chicago.
Houston.
Yes, I had the opportunity to talk to her at one of the Binny's events, and I went on and on and on about this whiskey that she picked, and I probably had a few too many and embarrassed myself fully, but hopefully I didn't embarrass myself.
Monique's awesome. She's a keeper of the Quake, actually, as well.
Well, that's yes, and her selection in this pick explains why she got that title. So.
All right, so I just poured myself. Actually, we were talking about special occasion. I actually have a few bottles that were forgotten about in a basement. We'll say some old Jim Beams. So I just poured myself a 78 Jim Beam, which I love these old Dusties. I think the last thing that we have to talk about before we end, you three, if you guys want to hang out for a little while. Obviously, we all have to probably work tomorrow. I know at least Dan and I do. Bardstown
this is my job.
The other big news, and it was really kind of later in the year, Bardstown Bourbon Company did the top whiskey taster of the year, or top whiskey taster, and this was kind of all over social media. They plastered it everywhere. They requested that you send in a video tasting whiskey, talking about why you would be the top whiskey taster of the year. Matt Porter of ADHD Whiskey was the top whiskey taster of the year with Bardstown Bourbon Company. He won. He's 11,000 subscribers on YouTube. He won it was a $20,000 cash prize that he won. He gets to travel the country doing bourbon tastings with Bardstown Bourbon Company. He gets to do all these great things. Regarding my thoughts, I'm going to give my 2 cents. We'll get to you three. $20,000 cash prize for somebody who already has tens of thousands of followers and probably already gets paid from YouTube. I don't think maybe was probably necessary. I think Bardstown Bourbon Company probably should have donated that $20,000 to Restaurant Relief, Bartender Relief, some other organization, versus giving here, guy who probably already makes this in 2 weeks off of YouTube. Here's more money. I think it's cool that they did that. Hats off to Matt Porter with ADHD Whiskey. I think he's pretty funny. He's got a taste that aligns, very similar to mine. Thoughts on? I know you guys have all seen it.
He hates Old Tub, by the way.
Thoughts on the top whiskey taster of the year? What's I mean, obviously it's gimmicky to me. It's very gimmicky.
You know, I paid attention to that contest when it came out. I considered being a part of it for all of about 6 minutes. Mostly because I
didn't break anything.
I'm not a big fan of Bardstown bourbon, but you know, it's a gimmick. It's a grand prize of the year. You know, and I agree with you that $20,000 could have probably been better spent. At the same time, my guess is this was planned a year or two ago, and you know, it's what they had in there.
Yeah. Sam?
So I actually applied for WTWT. World's Top. Yeah, WTWT. WT Squared. And somehow my entry got lost and never counted. So I'm more than a little salty, first and foremost. Let's just get that out of the way here. So I'm coming in this with more than a little bit of salt. That being said, congratulations to Matt. You know, I'm glad to hear that, you know, they found someone who's going to bring recognition to the brand. I would disagree in terms of the 20,000. You know, I don't think that someone, you know, unless he's got like, you know, 150,000 plus YouTube subscribers, I don't think he's making $20,000 any, you know, in any short amount of time. Especially not for, you know, what is probably considered so much less work than content creation, the research, and, you know, the traffic, driving the traffic and marketing. Yes, it could have been spent elsewhere, or they could have postponed it this year. Like, look, instead of giving, you know, some Joe Schmo out of, you know, some random place 20 grand, we're going to give it to our local teams, our local people, and, you know, let them support places that are, you know, that are still open doing to go, or, you know, will do a fundraiser, will match, you know, up to $20,000, and, you know, give it to another rally, which is a great program run by former bartenders who are trying to help save the hospitality industry right now. So yeah, the $20,000 could have been spent elsewhere, but the idea of the world's top whiskey taster is a neat idea. And, you know, like Jeff said, it's a yearly thing. It's a yearly title. But nonetheless, to be the first world's top whiskey taster is pretty, you know, it's a great thing. It'll be great for his marketing, great for his brand. But I do feel it's a little disingenuous, a little, you know, kind of great. Congratulations. Handshake deal. Oh, hey, how are you? Nice to meet you, new person.
Right. Dan, what about you? I mean,
it's kind of, you're doing it every year. It's kind of, you know, it takes away the glory and splendor.
Yeah. Dan, what about you? Because I know, like, you know, you and I are in chat conversations literally every day for at least the past 18 months. And you sent me a video like a week ago. We were talking about the Obtainium,
the cat's eye,
and you sent me the video with Matt Porter.
Yeah.
What's your thoughts? Do you think that $20,000 could have been used elsewhere? Do you think Matt Porter was, you know, worthy of it? Is it just, you know, hey, he's got 11,000 followers, he's funny, he's going to promote the brand?
I don't think he won because he's ADHD whiskey. I mean, there were other people in there. I don't know his name. Matt, I believe, is Wrestling with Whiskey.
Wrestling with Whiskey.
Yeah,
he was in there too. There were several other celebrities. I think, you know, I look at, first of all, I like ADHD whiskey. I don't always align with everything he says. He's not one of the guy I would 100% trust. I trust a lot of what he says, but I do think when I watch his shows, he's pretty good. He's doing an advent calendar right now, and he's nailed a couple, like, without knowing anything about it. He's like, I think this is Buffalo Trace, maybe Blanton's, and it was Blanton. So he's good. I think as far as $20,000, what if it wasn't ADHD whiskey? What if it was your neighbor who won, and $20,000 makes a big deal? And who's to say? I agree. I don't think he's making, with 11,000 subscribers, I don't think he's making a ton of money on YouTube. maybe it does mean a lot. And if he doesn't need the money, it's up to him to donate it. And I think they could have done something different with it, but it's not what the idea of the award was. The award was, we're going to select a person, give them money, give them this job, give them this title, and for a year, that's who they are. And they could have probably kicked in something to something else, but I think I think it was Jeff said, this is probably in the works a year or two ago and pre-COVID, and it is, and they're going to continue to do it. So
yeah.
I don't. It's a title that's just a title. It's just another marketing thing that someone came up with, and these brands and these distilleries and these companies have tons of money to throw at marketing. And this is like how much money if you watch his show, he talks about it every episode. They're getting free marketing out of it. So
yeah.
So is that part of the deal though? Is that you've got to mention it every time you're on camera for a year?
I doubt it. I don't think they can enforce something like that, can they?
Yeah, I don't know. I
don't know.
You can get agreements that say a whole lot of things.
I would imagine that with Matt Porter on ADHD Whiskey, I would imagine that they probably expected somebody who's already on YouTube reviewing all of these different things. I would, like you said, it's probably 2 or 3 years in the making. They probably knew that they were going to get somebody off of YouTube that's already got a huge followership. That has the time and effort that they can put into editing all these videos, that knows that, all right, listen, they're not going to dedicate in all of the rest of their episodes for the year to Bardstown, but he does get the benefit of going to all of these different venues, all of these different events to support and be an ambassador for Bardstown. So while his videos probably don't have to be Bardstown Bourbon Company oriented, because let's face it, they only have two core major products, being the Fusion and the Discovery, and then a couple of releases throughout the year. Those he'll represent throughout the year at different trade shows and so on and so forth. But I can't imagine that they've signed anywhere in any contract that says you only review Bardstown, because we have these two products that come out.
No. I wasn't suggesting that. What I was suggesting is that you have to mention it.
Oh, maybe.
Review.
Yeah, maybe it's possible for advertising.
It's kind of like when at the Super Bowl, the winner, whoever the winner is, what are you going to do? I'm going to Disney World.
I'm going to go to Disney World.
It's in the contract.
Yeah.
I would. And if I could say, going back to marketing, I love Bardstown Bourbon Company because they have the coolest bottle in the industry right now.
They do, and they have a heavy cap.
It's like big, heavy, thick bottom,
crazy heavy cork. Oh my god,
awesome bottle.
Yeah,
like that bottle. That stands out to me. Like I bought that bottle.
Then you'll be in love with Frey Ranch, which is actually good stuff.
Bardstown isn't watching this,
just fired.
We're gonna cut the short.
I wonder who has a heavier cap, Bardstown Bourbon or Whistlepig Boss Hog.
Oh, that's a heavy cap.
It's a sign of a good bourbon, though, isn't it? With the big, thick, heavy cap.
Oh yeah,
Restoration has a heavy cap on it.
Tater bait.
All right, guys, we've kind of extinguished our options. Our talking points. The only thing we missed was Stag Junior is available in 2021 as a single barrel. It was a barrel pick option. The first barrel was raffled off to a charity. If any of you are curious, I know some of you guys listening on the Fox Valley Whiskey Society are curious of our Weller Foolproof pick. It is not happening. The single barrel program is officially sold out for 2021. Everybody has bought their barrels. Restaurants, bars, liquor stores, individuals, they've already got their name in.
I can't imagine them passing up that barrel.
Yeah, probably won't be happening for us in the future, but we are working on Whiskey Acres. We're working on Cat's Eye with Obtainium. We're working on several others. Sam, I want to thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I hope I didn't talk too much.
If you guys are interested in some good reading, go to Beginner's Guide to Whiskey, or what's the website, Sam? Go ahead and plug it.
It is beginnersguidetowhiskey.com. www.beginnersguidetowhiskey.com. You can spell it with or without the E in whiskey. I own both domains to cover all you Scotch fanatics and all you American fanatics. I know a little bit about marketing. I have to cover my bases, ladies and gentlemen.
Good call. Great book to review if you guys are interested in whiskey with or without the E. Make sure to follow Beginner's Guide to Whiskey on Facebook. Sam Knash Green, super funny, just on his own on Facebook. Dan, I want to thank you for coming on. Kind of helping me do this whole thing with the Fox Valley Whiskey Society. Jeff, our resident whiskey reviewer. And good friend. Everybody out there, make sure you follow his blog, Whiskey Fellow. You post pretty regularly on all the major sites. Guys, this is our last video. Go ahead, Sam.
If I may, you can find me on Instagram, by the way. Follow me there, please. I post all sorts of random bullshit. It's kind of mix of business and personal. It's at the Whiskey Somm, THEWHISKEYSOMM. And you will see me ranting and raving and cursing far more than I did tonight.
You were pretty tame tonight, right? You were pretty tame.
And, I mean, Mike, you've seen my Facebook.
I've seen your Facebook, yeah. Dan Gryson, obviously, I want to thank you for just being you and being such a great friend. Guys, this is our last video of 2020. I will be posting something for those of you who follow or are members of the Fox Valley Whiskey Society. Middle of January, I will be posting something very near and dear to me. So keep an eye out for that. This is our last video of 2020. Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, Tet, whatever it is that you follow, whatever religion. Happy holidays, everybody. Be safe, wear a mask. Social distance, whatever you have to do to be safe. Guys, let's raise one more glass for 2020. Let's get over this fucking year, right? What a shitty
Fuck you 2020.
Fuck you 2020. Everybody, let's cheers to that.
Cheers.
You guys
cheers.
stay on for a little bit longer. Everybody out there who is watching, thank you for joining us tonight for the Roundtable 2020 year in review. We will see you guys and hopefully talk to you guys soon.
Bye
Cheers,
now.
everybody.
Bye.
Yeah.